This is the tale of a ruthless, mighty king from a dystopian world who's been reborn into a medieval ice sky realm. As a newborn, he awakens to find his parents gazing at him with pure joy and affection. They marvel at how his tiny face mirrors their own, overjoyed by the arrival of their newest family member. Father Reynolds instantly names him Arthur and demands that the little guy call him Papa. Meanwhile, Mother Alice feels Arthur's too young for such a title. Arthur answers with an empty baby stare, which Reynolds takes as a sign of a profound emotional bond. As his playful parents fuss over him, Arthur silently wonders who these people really are and why they claim to be his guardians. If they truly are who they appear to be, it means he died in his previous life and has somehow been reincarnated with all his memories intact. Staring up at the glittering night sky, Arthur can hardly believe that after conquering worlds and winning endless battles, the gods have reduced him to a feeble infant. Overwhelmed with embarrassment, not only must he endure burping, but he dreads wearing diapers and constantly fears being hurt. He can only clench his tiny fist in defense. Reynolds notices and gently slips a finger under Arthur's hand to show Alice just how much their son adores him. In a clumsy bid to move, Arthur pushes too hard and ends up soiling himself. As his mom hurries to clean him up, he stares blankly, silently regretting every twist of fate that led him to this mortifying moment. The humiliation nearly brings him to tears. He wishes this bizarre nightmare would end. Yet he knows he must face this harsh new reality. Putting his personal shame aside, Arthur soon witnesses something even more astonishing. His father effortlessly summons magic to bolster his strength. Suddenly, a small rock hits his dad's head, and his mom rushes to help him. This spectacular display fascinates Arthur, who's never encountered magic in his previous life. Determined to learn more, he realizes he must first grow up. On another front, Reynolds heads into the forest and overpowers a wild beast with his empowering magic. Not long after, a group of his friends stops by, marking the beginning of an entirely new chapter in his extraordinary journey. When Reynolds returns from hunting, Arthur can't help but wonder if this society lets everyone own weapons. If so, there must be a certain level of danger out there, and he figures it's only smart to pick up some abilities as fast as he can. Arthur has a ton of questions he can't ask yet, but despite his confusion, he treasures these pure, priceless moments with his parents. In his previous life, Arthur never knew a peaceful night's sleep because enemies were always trying to take him out. Now that he's finally experiencing calm, he gradually gets used to his new reality. After days, weeks, or maybe even months pass, Arthur learns to crawl and soon scampers over to a mirror just to admire his new look. With his crawling skills and better control over his limbs, he sneaks out of his crib when his parents aren't around and makes his way to the library. There, he grabs a book to learn more about this strange world and discovers that the continent he's born on is called Dicathan. Dicathan is divided into 3 kingdoms: the Darv Kingdom, where dwarves live; the Elenwar Kingdom, where elves rule deep within a forest; and the Sapin Kingdom, the human realm, which is Arthur's home. Unlike his previous world where anyone could seize power by killing the former King Arthur's nation, is a monarchy with a throne passed down through family lines. After picking up the basics of this new world, Arthur searches for a book on magic. With a struggle against his tiny baby arms, he manages to pull one from the shelf. Holding the book, he can't help but reflect on how much more advanced his old life was compared to this one. This book is meant to explain to study magic, what the locals call mana, a force passed down through generations that appears in just 1 out of every 100 people. Moreover, there are only 2 types of mana here: augmenting, which enhances the body's abilities, and conjuring, which lets the user project and control mana at will. While reading this, he recalls his mother's earlier healing powers, which clearly confirm she is a conjurer, even though everyone with mana possesses a mana core that most spellcasters access at the start of puberty. Once they master it, they can become mages. Having read this, Arthur finds it akin to the concept of Kai, which he knows well. However, he doubts whether such knowledge could ever serve as a weapon for him, given his wannabe warrior nature. At that instant, he summons his inner Kai and is about to reach a new level when his mother Alice interrupts him. She lifts him up like the precious little one he is and examines him closely. At first, he thinks she's figured him out, but no, she's merely detected the truth. He definitely soiled himself, and the odor isn't subtle at all. While Alice goes to change his diapers, Arthur is distraught by how much his body feels like a prison. He vows to gain more power. Later, Alice spends time recording details of Arthur's life and is delighted by his progress in this world. Yet she is troubled that he has never smiled at them, a thought that saddens her. She looks out the window to find her husband Reynolds teaching Arthur how to use a sword. Reynolds is eager to share Arthur's improvements, but she is angry with him for instructing their young son in such a dangerous skill. She believes he is far too young to handle a sword and scolds her husband loudly. Meanwhile, Arthur watches them intently, using their interactions as a framework to understand the structure of marriage, even as he begins to suspect that the world they live in might be ruled by women. Later that day, Alice takes Arthur to the market, and he is thrilled by everything he sees. Every item he beholds seems like a lesson waiting to be learned. He even gets to observe magic up close, which he finds extremely enlightening. On the way back, as he gradually drifts to sleep, he reflects on how much his family has helped him. Eventually, they return home and Alice carries him to his room. After a while, she chatters about how delighted she is whenever he sneaks out of bed to read, and how curious he gets while at the market. She believes he inherited these traits from his father Reynolds, just like him. She even muses that he might one day set off to explore the world, though she hopes he'll live a more tranquil life. The next day, Arthur watches his father work his magic and is thrilled at the idea of learning up close from him. She assures him that Reynolds is only getting started and urges him to watch even more intently. At that moment, Reynolds boosts his magic, pulling off some impressive advanced maneuvers. Observing this, Arthur immediately deduces that his father is an augmenter. Pumped to try a trick of his own, his daydream is abruptly halted when his mom announces it's bedtime. As she carries him to his room, he spots a book on the shelf and keeps pointing at it, pleading loudly for a chance to read it. After flashing his irresistibly cute face for a moment, she finally relents and lets him read for a bit. While he's engrossed in the book, he reminds himself of all the knowledge he's absorbed in his quest to form his own mana core. Concentrating hard, he channels mana from different parts of his body to a single point. After a while, just when his parents assume he's finally asleep, a loud explosion erupts from inside the house. In that instant, Reynolds leaps into action to protect Alice, and in the process, ends up with burns on his back. After checking that Alice is safe, both parents suddenly remember they left Arthur behind. Hurriedly, they dash into the house, only to be stunned by the sight of Arthur floating in midair. They stand there utterly speechless as he slowly descends to the ground. Just then, the roof begins to cave in. Being just a child, Arthur couldn't dodge in time, but his parents quickly shield him from what could have been a fatal fall. Soon afterward, tears stream down their faces, and for the first time, Arthur finds himself crying too, realizing that Alice and Reynolds would do anything to keep him safe, a sense of security he never experienced in his past life. The story kicks off by giving us a glimpse into Arthur's past life, when he was known as King Grey. Back then, a royal servant was caught trying to assassinate him, and by law, the man should have been executed without question. Instead, the king's council chose to exile him and his entire family back to his homeland. Fully aware that a fate far worse than death awaited them there, the terrified assassin begged King Grey to spare his family. In a ruthless display, King Grey personally slaughtered the man's wife and daughter right before his eyes, a chilling act of twisted mercy that even prompted the assassin to thank him for his mercy. Fast forward to the present. Arthur is now 4 years old and spending time with his father, Reynolds, who gifts him a pair of matching combat gloves just like his own. However, Arthur declines the gloves, opting instead for his wooden sword. He believes that due to his small stature, the gloves would only shorten his reach and put him at a disadvantage. Reynolds doesn't argue. He simply smiles and continues with their usual combat training. But today isn't like the others. In the midst of sparring, Arthur reveals that he's learned to channel mana into his sword. With one sudden reinforced strike, he shatters Reynolds' sword. For the first time in his life, Arthur wins, leaving Reynolds completely stunned and unprepared for his son's rapid growth. Later, at dinner, Reynolds decides it's time to secure a proper instructor for Arthur, realizing that without one, he might be hindering his own son's progress. Arthur's mother Alice opposes the idea fiercely, knowing that getting a tutor would force their little boy to leave their peaceful hillside home and venture alone to the city at such a young age. Reynolds was sure Arthur needed real magic training, said it'd shape his future. Alice didn't agree, and they started arguing over dinner. In the middle of it, Arthur spoke up. He said they should all go to the city. Reynolds finds a proper tutor. Alice stays close. That way, everybody's good. Without hesitation, both parents agree, and they immediately begin packing for their move to the city. Shortly thereafter, Reynolds' friend group and adventuring party known as the Twin Horns arrives in person to escort Arthur and his family to the city. Arthur introduces himself to them, and their leader, Adam, remarks that they've met before, although he assumes a kid like Arthur wouldn't remember. Still, Arthur recalls everything vividly, especially the time he blew up the entire house. Back then, the Twin Horns came to help rebuild it, and Arthur overheard their conversation. discovering that his parents were once members of the Twin Horns before settling down. Once Adam finishes speaking with Arthur, Angela steps in and basically deploys the airbag on him, the hugs so tight Arthur can't even breathe. Durden quickly pulls him away, and that's when Arthur notices a young woman silently watching him from atop the carriage. She's Jasmine, a somewhat aloof presence who keeps to herself, but before Arthur can dwell on her, Helen approaches and introduces both herself and Jasmine on her behalf. With that, the journey to Xyrus City begins. At the same time, Arthur quietly muses on how primitive this transportation system is compared to his old world, where flying cars were the norm. Even so, he doesn't mind too much, especially with his caring mom by his side throughout the trip. They take several breaks along the way, and during one pause, a pack of wild wolf monsters suddenly attacks, forcing Arthur to confront the true dangers of the outside world. Jasmine steps in decisively and with her daggers takes down the wolves with remarkable ease. Reynolds, Adam, and the rest of the Twin Horns join the fray, and soon they subdue the threat. Watching from the sidelines, Arthur becomes inspired by his companions and eagerly anticipates joining them in the next battle. That same night during a feast, Arthur notices that Alice isn't eating anything. She claims she's full, but something feels off. Soon enough, she spots an injury on Reynolds' arm and hurries to heal him. As she applies her healing magic, the atmosphere shifts. The group becomes cautious, quietly keeping watch to ensure no one is spying on them. It quickly becomes clear to Arthur that these precautions are necessary because healing magic is both rare and highly coveted in this world. By the looks of it, the very reason Reynolds and Alice lived in seclusion on the hillside was to keep Alice's extraordinary abilities hidden from prying eyes. Following the feast, Adam takes Arthur from his parents, eager to spar with the little guy to see if he's as skilled as Reynolds claims. The rest of the group, equally curious about the prodigy's potential, gathers around, forming an unexpected crowd. Only 4 years old, Arthur wonders if none of them are even a bit worried about him. This marks his first sparring match against anyone other than his father. Unlike Reynolds, who trained him with a simple wooden stick, Adam wields a real spear. As soon as the duel begins, Adam wastes no time infusing his spear with mana. Arthur responds in kind but goes one better, channeling magic into his feet to boost his speed dramatically. In that moment, everyone was stunned that a child his age could release such mana. In a flash, he darts forward and lands the first hit before Adam can react, sliding cleanly between Adam's legs and creating enough distance to leave the entire group speechless at his incredible speed and precision. The battle intensifies as the two clash head-on, but the power gap soon becomes undeniable. Arthur soon realizes that his small frame is like that of a balloon and ends up being sent flying by the impact, a sudden reminder of just how light and fragile his current body is during direct combat. Before he can hit the ground too hard, Angela uses her wind magic to gently lower him, softening his fall. Durden quickly intervenes, reprimanding Adam for going too far with a little kid, reminding him that he was supposed to hold back. Adam raises his hands in apology, admitting he got carried away, though he claims it was only because Arthur's technique caught him completely off guard. Deep down, he can't help but wonder what kind of intense training Reynolds has put this kid through to shape him into such a force at only 4 years old. Glancing to the side, Arthur notices Jasmine watching him with a curious look. She asks how he managed that move and begs him to teach her the secret. Seeing the blank look on her face, he concludes that she won't give up until she gets what she wants. The following morning, the family continues their journey and soon stops at a quiet spot where Arthur can continue his training. Adam shows him how to use a spear while Reynolds demonstrates some impressive gym bro moves. Next, Helen takes over and teaches him archery, and in no time, he becomes quite skilled. After finishing all his training for the day, he begins giving Jasmine the lessons she demanded, and she turns out to be a quick study. That night, while Big Kid Arthur is quietly reading a book, Jasmine keeps staring at him as if mesmerized by his non-existent handsomeness, and soon enough, she starts acting like a bit of a stalker. The following day happens to be Arthur's birthday, and Jasmine presents him with a dagger as a gift. To everyone's surprise, she even takes the time to explain how to use it properly. Not long after, Adam decides it's time to move on. Just then, Alice calls out to Arthur, but soon she suddenly feels unwell. When Arthur notices her pain and asks what's wrong, she assures him she's fine, though he isn't completely buying her explanation. As they press on with their journey, they are ambushed by bandits. The family jumps out of the carriage and quickly takes defensive positions. Arrows begin to fly, but Angela manages to shield them all with her magic barrier. Scanning the area, Arthur realizes they are almost completely surrounded. Meanwhile, the bandit leader, a guy with a cube-shaped head, orders his men not to hurt the women and children, explaining that he plans to sell them for a good profit. Before the bandits get any closer, they aggressively charge in. A visibly scared Alice tries to keep Arthur calm, and just in time, Durden blasts the attackers away while Reynolds swiftly deals with them using his fists. When one bandit is about to strike Reynolds, Helen fires an arrow straight through his wicked heart. Adam slices past several bandits with his spear, and Jasmine quickly takes down others with her daggers. Watching this all unfold, Arthur realizes that each member of the Twin Horns is individually very skilled. Still, with the bandits outnumbering them, the odds don't look good. After a fierce fight, exhaustion sets in as the bandits persist in their assault. Eventually, the bandits slam Reynolds into the carriage, leaving him unconscious. This allows the unsightly bandit leader to move closer to Alice and Arthur. Shortly after, Reynolds regains consciousness while they're running out of the carriage. Even in his battered state, he still musters enough resolve to be the man. He urges Arthur to take his mother and run away. Hearing this, Arthur insists on staying to fight alongside them, but his father then reveals that his mother is pregnant. This revelation finally explains the lingering suspicion Arthur had about why his mother always seemed unwell. Reynolds then orders Arthur to leave immediately, trusting that the boy will protect his mother and unborn brother. In a rush, Arthur grabs Alice and starts fleeing. Enraged, the large-mouthed bandit leader barks for his men to stop them. Before things get worse, Reynolds charges at the bandit leader, and just when it seems like Arthur and Alice might be caught, Adam and Jasmine launch knives at the attackers to clear a path. Soon enough, every member of the party bands together to help Arthur and Alice escape while they face the bandits head-on. As they run, Arthur reflects on his dark past. Once he'd stolen souls, and now he's terrified of losing the ones he loves. The very thought of his loved ones being taken away fills him with sorrow, but all his small feet can do is run for his life. After a while, Arthur senses an attack approaching from the mountains. He looks up to see a suspicious man launching a magic strike. Instinctively, he shoves his mother aside, but the magical blow catches him, causing him to lose balance and tumble off the mountain. Determined not to meet the underworld alone, he uses the dagger Jasmine gave him with a string attached and flings it at the enemy. The dagger latches onto the man's leg, pulling him down from the mountaintop. Meanwhile, Durden and Angela try their magic to save Arthur, but he's too far away for it to reach him before he falls. As he descends, Arthur's thoughts turn inward while his mother, watching with outstretched hands, feels hopeless and sheds tears at the thought of losing him. Yet despite the peril, Arthur finds solace in knowing he protected his family even if it might cost him his life. He's bittersweetly sad that he won't get to be the big brother he always dreamed of being. In a surprising turn, Arthur survives the fall. He later wakes up in a terrifying forest, face to face with a massive, fierce-looking monster, a sight that leaves him utterly terrified. After that, in a desperate attempt, he tries sneaking up on the monster to boost his survival odds. But the monster just bats him out of midair and tells him to relax. The monster explains it isn't evil and only wants to be friends, though the last time someone made that claim to me, I ended up doing yoga in a basement with no windows, so I'm not sure Arthur should trust it. Either way, he's badly injured and won't heal unless he eats something substantial. So the monster begins plucking odd-looking fruits from the cave wall. It urges Arthur to eat, but he doesn't trust those strange cave berries and is about to haul himself up to talk his way out. Then his exhaustion hits him like a ton of bricks, and as he fights to stand, he hears a snap in his leg before he breaks down in tears. The monster tells him to cut it out, reminding him that surviving that fall at all is nothing short of a miracle. Arthur has tons of questions, but the monster insists it will only answer if he actually eats the fruit. His stomach protests louder than his doubts, but after popping the first berry in his mouth, he discovers it tastes surprisingly good, like a sweet mix of berries and honey. After polishing off the fruit, Arthur wipes his fingers on his pants and asks if it knows anything about his parents' situation. The monster admits it can't leave the cave to check on them directly. Still, it can see great distances through some magical sense. Then it conjures a glowing, translucent screen that floats in midair. Arthur watches as it reveals his parents fighting and finishing off the rest of the bandits. Seeing them safe and sound makes his heart pound with relief. He can't believe they pulled through. He thanks the monster for giving him the heads up that his folks are doing fine. And since Arthur's gonna be chillin' here for a bit, he figures he might as well buddy up with it. Turns out the monster's name is Sylvia, and she's actually pretty cool. For the next couple days, Arthur kicks back, eats good, and rests up till his injuries get patched. Sylvia stays close, keeping an eye on him the whole time. Soon as he's feeling back to normal, Arthur's ready to bounce and head straight back home. But Sylvia says Arthur wouldn't even make it halfway back home on his own. Right now, he's holed up in her cave on the edge of the elven forest, and this area is crawling with nasty magical beasts and sketchy bandits lurking everywhere. Arthur just isn't ready to handle all that yet. That doesn't mean he's permanently stuck here though. Sylvia can open a dimensional rift, which means she can send Arthur home, or at the very least, somewhere way safer than this forest. It's gonna take a long while for her to get that rift open, though, so Arthur's stuck waiting until then. Since there's not much else going on, he grabs a stick off the ground and starts swinging it around, practicing his sword skills. Days pass by like this, and even though Arthur really enjoys hanging out with Sylvia, he hasn't learned much of anything about her. All he knows is she looks terrifyingly strong. She's clearly hiding from someone, and despite her scary appearance, she's actually incredibly kind. After finishing sword practice for the day, Arthur heads over to his usual rock, sits down, and begins training his mana. Sylvia's impressed that someone as young as Arthur already developed a mana core, but she's certain nobody taught him how to use it properly yet. She holds out her hand, and suddenly a huge amount of mana starts gathering there. Arthur's amazed watching her build up mana while still casting her spell. If he ever mastered something like this, he'd undoubtedly become insanely powerful. But before Sylvia even mentions teaching him anything, she asks Arthur straight up what he's planning to do with all the strength he'll gain from learning this technique. Arthur never really thought about that until now, but when he does, he instantly recalls the bandits who almost wiped out everyone he loves. He tells Sylvia he'll use his new strength to destroy anyone stupid enough to hurt his family. Sylvia isn't thrilled hearing that answer, so she flicks Arthur hard on the forehead, knocking him back. She flat out refuses to teach her skill to someone who thinks that way, leaving Arthur confused as to why she's so bothered. After all, wanting revenge against people who hurt you is just human nature. Sylvia decides to prove a point by lifting her finger and aiming it straight at Arthur's head. She calmly explains that she could easily crack his skull wide open, or she could gently tap him instead. Sylvia gives Arthur the choice, and obviously Arthur isn't looking to die, so he chooses the gentle option. She explains that letting anger and hate drive you might seem easy, but once you give in, your life becomes an empty loop of bitterness. Sylvia doesn't want Arthur throwing his life away like that, so she asks him again what he'll do with the power. Arthur pauses to think once more, this time picturing the smiling faces of everyone he cares about. He finally says he'll use his strength to protect the people closest to him, and Sylvia clearly prefers this answer. At the same time, outside the cave, another monster, who looks a lot like Sylvia, is busy tracking her down and is getting dangerously close. Back in Arthur's past life, he was king, but being king didn't mean he called all the shots. In reality, the senators held the true power, treating Arthur more like their personal war puppet, sending him out whenever they needed ruthless violence. Arthur never wanted to live like that. Snapping back to the present, Sylvia starts teaching Arthur her special mana technique. After demonstrating how it's done, she tells him to try it out for himself. Arthur starts pulling in mana from the surrounding air, and once he gets the hang of it, he uses this energy to power himself up. Immediately feeling stronger, he runs to Sylvia, excitedly thanking her for teaching him something so amazing. But suddenly, Sylvia senses someone approaching and quickly knocks Arthur into a pile of rocks, telling him to keep quiet. Arthur has no clue what's happening, so he peeks out from his hiding spot and sees another creature who looks just like Sylvia. Sylvia clearly recognizes him, surprised he managed to find her here, but he doesn't waste any time, demanding Sylvia come along immediately. Sylvia firmly refuses, so he instantly launches an attack. Arthur wants to jump in to help, but Sylvia's voice echoes in his head, telling him not to worry about her. The monster tries convincing Sylvia it'd be easier to cooperate, otherwise he'll have no choice but to kill her. Sylvia, however, would rather die than listen to him, so she quickly gathers her mana, unveiling her true form. Turns out Sylvia's a dragon, and in this form, her strength is on a whole other level. She fires a massive blast at the other monster, but he manages to block it, warning Sylvia that she's being reckless, especially considering the current state of her body won't allow her to survive using that much power. Sylvia knows she's probably not going to make it through this, but she's accepted it, having already lived a long and fulfilling life. She succeeds in pushing the other monster into a wall, but he isn't finished yet and quickly retaliates, unleashing several powerful blasts towards Sylvia. She takes significant damage, yet right now her biggest concern isn't herself, it's Arthur, because the fight is dangerously close to the spot where she had knocked him. When the monster fires another blast at her, she realizes dodging isn't an option without risking Arthur's safety, so she channels all her remaining strength to intercept it, temporarily freezing time in the process. With everything around them frozen, Sylvia quickly tells Arthur it's safe to come out of hiding. Arthur cautiously approaches, eager to ask Sylvia about everything going on, especially now that he knows she's actually a dragon, but there's no time left for explanations. Sylvia's power to hold time and place won't last much longer, so she urgently needs to get Arthur out of there. She opens the dimensional rift she'd been preparing, but due to her injuries and the rushed nature of the spell, the portal ends up connecting to some random place instead of Arthur's home. She'd wanted to avoid sending him into the dangerous forest, but now there's simply no choice. Still, Sylvia is confident that Arthur can survive on his own and eventually find his way back home using the technique she taught him, so she isn't worried about him anymore. Before sending him off, Sylvia asks Arthur once more what he'll do with his newfound strength. Without any hesitation, Arthur says he'll only use his power to protect his family, an answer that reassures Sylvia he'll never misuse it selfishly. Before he leaves, Sylvia has a few final gifts for him. She forms an egg and a feather right in front of Arthur, instructing him carefully to wrap the egg with the feather and keep it safe. As a final farewell gift, she also transfers her will onto Arthur, creating a mark on his arms. Arthur's confused by suddenly getting 2 full-sleeve tattoos, but Sylvia has no strength left to explain anything further. Sylvia tells Arthur he'll figure out how to use it someday, but sadly, she won't be around to show him how anymore. She also comes clean, apologizing for being selfish because honestly, she could have sent him home to his family from the very start. But having him around was way too fun to give up, and now, because of that selfish decision, Arthur ended up in danger. Arthur feels awful knowing there's nothing he can do to keep Sylvia from dying here, despite everything she's taught him. He doesn't care if she's a dragon, monster, or whatever else. To him, Sylvia's family, plain and simple. Arthur even says she's kinda like a mom, but Sylvia gently reminds him he's already got one of those. Arthur thinks a second, then says she could be his grandma instead. Sylvia definitely wasn't ready for that, but she loves hearing it, asking Arthur to call her grandma again. He happily does. It breaks Sylvia's heart that she won't ever get to see Arthur again, but they're running short on time, so she nudges him toward the portal. Arthur gets the message, takes the gifts she gave him, and starts walking through, but at the last second he hesitates, trying to convince Sylvia to come along. She can't though, and with a heavy heart, she closes the portal, sending Arthur safely away. Time snaps back to normal, and Sylvia takes the full force of the monster's blast. It looks deadly serious. She drops to the ground motionless, but the monster isn't buying it. Sylvia's too strong to die from just one hit, but he makes a huge mistake letting his guard down as he closes in on her. Sylvia uses every last ounce of strength to unleash one final, devastating blast, vaporizing him and everything around for a mile. As Arthur teleports away, Sylvia sends one last message. She reminds him about their earlier talk on the right way to use power. Arthur remembers clearly, but still feels crushed by what happened. Sylvia reassures him the world's a tough place, and these tragic moments happen. That's exactly why Arthur's gotta change it for the better. Arthur doesn't buy it at first, saying there's no chance someone like him could pull that off. Sylvia tells him she's not expecting miracles overnight. Small steps will do just fine. Besides, this isn't Arthur's first rodeo running the world. Sylvia knows all about his past life as king, and even though she didn't agree with how he handled things back then, she's confident that if Arthur keeps hate out of his heart this time, he'll grow into a great king who makes the world a better place. A bit later, Arthur wakes up on the forest floor, promising himself he'll keep Sylvia's request. But first things first, he's got to figure out how to get himself out of this forest. As he walks through the thick trees, a sharp, gut-wrenching scream cuts through the silence. It's high-pitched and desperate, and it sounds like a small fry in trouble. Arthur doesn't hesitate. He channels mana into his legs and bursts forward. He leaps into the nearest tall tree for a better view, and from up there, he spots the scene clearly. Down below, a group of filthy bandits is snatching up a young elven girl. She tried to run, but they've already caught her, one of them clamping a hand over her mouth to muffle her cries. These guys know what they're doing. They tie her up without wasting time and toss her into the back of their carriage. Elves fetch a high price on the black market, and they're planning to cash in the moment they clear the forest. Watching this all unfold, Arthur's hands ball into fists. The sight sends him right back to the day his own family was ambushed. He remembers the fear, the chaos, and the bandits talking about selling the women and kids off while keeping him alive for labor. That rage begins bubbling up again. His first instinct is to drop down and wipe them all out on the spot, but he stops himself. Sylvia's voice echoes in his mind, reminding him not to lose control. He takes a breath, focuses, and calms that storm inside him. If things ever start to feel dull again, go check out Anime Scar Recaps. Jumping in now could get the girl killed, so he decides to wait. He starts tailing them quietly through the trees, keeping his presence hidden. The bandits keep moving until nightfall, then set up camp when it gets too dark to travel. Arthur finds a nearby perch and watches them carefully, debating whether to wait until they reach a town or strike now. That decision becomes easier when he overhears one of the bandits mention how elves are his favorite. Arthur's blood boils again. He knows he can't risk leaving the girl alone with these animals any longer, but he still needs full cover of darkness. So he sits down and meditates, letting his mind clear and his senses sharpen. He knows what's coming. What he's about to do won't be clean, and it won't be pretty. Once the forest is completely dark, Arthur opens his eyes. It's time. As he prepares to move, he notices a group of horned wolves nearby. They're leashed and quiet, too quiet for wild beasts. That's when he spots the magic collars around their necks. They're enchanted, probably to keep the wolves obedient. Arthur smirks. If the bandits can use them, then maybe he can turn that magic against them. That's when Arthur tosses a couple of rocks at the wolves to rile them up, and the sudden howling draws the bandits' attention right away. The leader snaps at one of his men, telling him to go shut those damn things up before they bring trouble. The bandit walks over and kicks one of the wolves in the neck to make it stop barking. And just as he's focused on that, Arthur sees his chance. He summons his blade and drops behind the man, slashing him down within seconds. He grabs the weapon off the ground, and when another bandit comes to check out the noise, Arthur jumps on his back and slices his throat before he can react. That's already 2 down, but Arthur's body is starting to wear out, and he knows he can't drag this out for much longer. Another bandit comes over, probably wondering what's taking the others so long, and Arthur rushes in to strike him fast too. He aims to finish it in one blow, but he misses the vital area, and the man screams, loud enough to alert the rest of the camp. The bandit leader quickly realizes Arthur's a mage, and that changes things. He doesn't want to kill him anymore, since selling a young mage could make him way more money than the elf girl ever would. He starts building mana into his arms and swings at Arthur, who jumps back and tries to counter with a kick, but the leader dodges easily. Arthur throws his knife to catch him off guard, but the bandit catches it mid-air and uses it against him, knocking Arthur down in the process. He grabs him by the ankles and lifts him up just to humiliate him, mocking how a kid could never match the strength of an adult. Arthur knows he's right, and instead of struggling, he uses that moment to cast a fireball straight onto the bandit's knee. While the man's yelling in pain, Arthur grabs the same knife and stabs him in the head, ending it for good. Now only the wounded bandit remains, and Arthur walks over and finishes him off without a word. Once it's done, he heads over to the carriage to check on the girl inside. She's been blindfolded the entire time, unaware of what's happening. Arthur unties her and tells her it's all over now, doesn't need to worry. She says her name is Tesha, and as Arthur helps her step out of the carriage, she notices the blood on his hand and looks up at him, her eyes full of quiet concern. Arthur figures it's only natural for a kid to be freaked out by the sight of blood, so maybe letting her see bodies all over the ground isn't the best move right now. He tells Tesha to wait right there for a minute while he goes around and covers the corpses with a tarp he found in the camp. Tesha asks what happened to the men who took her, and Arthur doesn't feel like going into the whole murder part, so he tells her they had a bit of an accident, and they won't be a problem anymore. She doesn't ask any more questions after that. Arthur grabs her stuff out of the bandit's carriage and hands it to her, telling her it's time for him to head out. But Tesha clings to his arm and begs him not to leave. She doesn't want to be alone in the forest because if she gets lost, something like a tree ghost might show up and eat her. Arthur asks if she knows how to get back to her village, and she says she does, but she has no idea how far it is or how long the trip might take. He's not excited about going on a random forest tour, but at the same time, he knows there's no way she's making it out on her own, so he agrees to take her back home. He glances at the wolves the bandits had captured and briefly considers riding them to save time. But he has no clue how to control a wolf and isn't looking to die trying. He decides it's safer to leave them behind. Tesha, though, thinks they should at least take the collars off so the wolves can return to the wild. Arthur warns her that might not be the smartest idea, since once those collars come off, the wolves could snap and tear them apart. Tesha's not worried. says she hasn't done anything to upset them. And besides, it's part of her role in the forest to look out for the creatures that live here. She removes the collars, and the wolves walk away peacefully without even looking back. By the time morning rolls around, Arthur and Tesha are already making their way through the forest toward her village. After walking for a while, they stop to rest and eat. Arthur makes some questionable stew with whatever he had in his bag, throwing stuff into the pot like a medieval Matty Matheson. Tesha gives the pot a sniff and immediately regrets it. It smells weird, but Arthur tells her she has to eat anyway. It's just dried meat and salt, tastes like someone boiled a bad decision, but it'll keep them going. While they eat, Tesha looks up and asks what brought Arthur to Elshire Forest in the first place, since humans don't usually come here, let alone a kid wandering around alone. That's when Arthur starts explaining how he got separated from his family and ended up here. Since they're already talking, he asks Tesha what it's like living in the kingdom of Elenoir, and she immediately lights up. Her parents are often buried in work, so she spends most of her time with her servant and her grandfather. It's obvious she cares about them deeply. They continue their journey, but Tesha has no idea how far her village is, which makes it impossible to know how long this will take. To make things worse, those wolves she let go haven't stopped following them, and Arthur's starting to wish he'd dealt with them earlier. That night, Arthur decides to stay outside and keep watch while she sleeps, just in case the wolves get too bold. But after a while, Tesha peeks out from the tent and asks him to come inside. He says he's not tired and would rather stay out there to keep an eye on things. But she doesn't want to be alone. She keeps asking him until he finally agrees and joins her inside, deciding to stay alert from there. Tesha tries to act like she's not scared, but she won't let him stray too far from her side. Before she falls asleep, she asks something strange about the human kingdom. She wants to know if it's true that humans are perverts who take multiple wives. Arthur raises an eyebrow and asks where that idea came from, and she tells him her grandfather said it. Arthur admits that kind of behavior exists, mostly among nobles, but says regular people don't live like that. Tesha seems to accept that and falls asleep right away. Over the past few days, Tesha has been warming up to Arthur. She's smiling more and seems to have forgotten about the slave traders, but she's still hopeless when it comes to survival. She can't even cross a creek without help, so Arthur has to carry her across himself. All of a sudden, a deep sharp pain shoots through Arthur's chest. He leans against a tree, trying to catch his breath, and Tesha runs off to look for herbs that might help. But Arthur already knows this isn't some regular illness. While he's slumped against the tree, one of the wolves steps out from the woods. Arthur's eyes lock on it, but his body's too weak to move. If the thing decides to come closer, there's no way he'll be able to defend himself. That's when Tesha returns with a bunch of herbs in her hands, but Arthur tells her to stay back because the wolf's still nearby and might be dangerous. But before anything happens, the wolf drops a dead pig right in front of him, then turns around and disappears into the woods like it's done its job. Arthur doesn't know what to make of it, but Tesha figures it's the wolf's way of saying thanks for earlier. Either way, now they've got meat. Later that night, they roast the pig and sit by the fire. The meat tastes way better than the stew from before, and Tesha enjoys every bite. While they're eating, she mentions that she found some mushrooms earlier and hands a few over to Arthur. He eats some without thinking twice, but it's a bad idea. Before long, Arthur's curled up with stomach pain, regretting everything. After an unpleasant trip to the bushes and what feels like his soul leaving his body, he comes back looking drained. He's barely hanging on when Tesha starts talking again. She tells him her grandfather used to read her stories about humans and dwarves and how she always wanted to visit their kingdoms. But she was never allowed to go since elves don't trust other races. Halfway through her story, she realizes Arthur hasn't heard a word she said. He's already half asleep. Then she covers him with a blanket and tells him to rest easy. In the morning, they set off again, but Arthur's chest pain is getting worse. Tesha says sorry for not being able to help, but Arthur tells her not to worry about it. To distract him, she asks if she can start calling him Artie since they've spent so much time together. Arthur says he's cool with it, and Tesha's surprised he didn't tease her for it. Then Arthur messes with her a little by acting dramatic and swearing he'll forever honor the moment the great Lady Tesha made him her friend. She tells him to quit playing around. Arthur laughs and reminds her how she was clinging to him at night because she was scared. Tesha snaps back, saying that was a totally different situation. Jokes aside, Arthur realizes this might be the first real friend he's ever had. Back in his old life, people either avoided him or feared him. No one ever got close. Right then, Tesha spots something ahead and calls Arthur over. He figures it's just some weird tree or maybe a bug she thinks is cute. Instead, it's a massive tree with a glowing portal in the middle of it. Tesha turns to him, holds out her hand, and says this is the entrance to her village. She tells him to come with her. Things take a turn the moment Arthur steps foot in the elf village. The elves, still holding a deep grudge against humans, surround him instantly and hold blades to his neck. He turns to Tesha, thinking she'll speak up for him. But to his surprise, she just stares him down with a cold, blank look and says nothing. Arthur feels the sting right away. It hits him like betrayal. After everything they went through, he thinks she set him up. He can't believe he let himself trust anyone again. He's been through this before. Back in his past life, betrayal was a regular visitor. And now, here it is again. The elves raise their weapons, ready to take his head off, while Tesha just stands there. Then finally, she speaks. As soon as she hears one of the guards mention killing Arthur, she tells them to stop. One of them pushes back, calling Arthur a dangerous human. Tesha shuts that down fast, saying he's the only reason she made it home alive. You'd think that would make them back off. But no, the lead guard decides she must have been brainwashed, so he's still planning to go through with it. Before the sword can drop, a new voice cuts in. A man steps forward and orders them to release the boy. That's Virion, Tesha's grandfather and the former king of the elves. Unlike the others, he's got some sense. He believes Tesha and thanks Arthur for saving her. He even apologizes for how things were handled. From his perspective, it looked real suspicious. The missing princess suddenly shows up with a random human kid. Still, he gives Arthur the benefit of the doubt. Arthur breathes a little easier, relieved that he's not getting killed today. But then another bomb drops. Tesha's a princess. They traveled together for days, and she never once brought that up. Right on cue, her parents arrive after hearing their daughter's been found. Tesha runs straight into their arms, emotional and relieved. That's when it all clicks for Arthur. If she's royalty, then these two must be the king and queen of Eleanor. Only difference is, they're not nearly as calm as Virion. The second Tesha's father spots Arthur, he demands to know what a filthy human is doing in his kingdom. Then he gives the order capture the human and execute him on the spot. But the guards don't budge. Even though Tesha's father is technically the king, Virion's word carries more weight around here. And right now Virion says Arthur stays safe, so nobody dares touch him. Everyone's terrified of the old elf. Virion calmly reminds the king that Arthur is the reason Tesha made it home safely, so treating him like a criminal isn't an option. Tesha jumps in, demanding that Arthur be invited into the castle as an honored guest. Her father hesitates, clearly uncomfortable. Humans normally aren't allowed anywhere near the elf kingdom, much less inside the castle. Still, he knows better than to trigger a meltdown from Tesha, so he reluctantly agrees. With things finally settled, everyone gets ready to head to the castle. Before they go, Virion pulls Arthur aside and mentions he wants to talk privately later. Arthur feels a bit uneasy about this, sensing Virion's incredibly strong presence. But he doesn't get much time to worry because Tesha immediately grabs his hand and starts pulling him along, eager to show him around. It's Arthur's first time in the elf kingdom, and he's amazed by how different everything is compared to the human kingdom. Yet the elves clearly aren't fans of humans. Everywhere Arthur goes, elves stop what they're doing just to stare at him as he walks beside Tesha. No one openly says anything rude though. Now that he's officially a royal guest, Tesha is really the only one openly welcoming him. Still, something's bugging Arthur. He can't figure out why Tesha took so long to speak up earlier when the guards were about to execute him. Before he can dwell on that thought, the familiar pain in his chest suddenly comes back, sharper than ever. It's been getting steadily worse, but he still has no idea what's causing it. When they arrive at the castle, Tesha is warmly greeted by her servants, and she quickly instructs them to treat Arthur with kindness and respect, human or not. With that out of the way, Tesha asks Arthur if he wants to go play with her now. But Arthur has something important to do first. He tells Tesha they should meet with her parents. They're probably expecting a full rundown of what happened and how Tesha made it home. Everyone moves to the meeting room, and Tesha tags along, refusing to be left behind. Since they're all gathering anyway, she suggests they grab some snacks, turning this serious meeting into more of a tea party vibe. With everyone settled, Tesha's father decides it's time for proper introductions. He formally introduces himself as Alduin, the king of Eleanor. His wife's name is Muriel, and as Arthur already knows, his father is Virion. Arthur politely introduces himself as a humble commoner from the kingdom of Sapin. He knows full well that under normal circumstances, a human like him wouldn't even get close to Eleanor, much less meet the royal family, so he sincerely thanks them for welcoming him here. Alduin is caught off guard by Arthur's mature attitude, especially since he's just a kid. but he's more interested in hearing exactly what happened to Tesha and how she ended up lost in the first place. Arthur lays it out clearly how he got separated from his family during a bandit attack and ended up stranded in the elven forest. Of course, he leaves out his secret meeting with Sylvia in the cave. When he reaches the part about rescuing Tesha from slave traders, Alduin's anger boils over. He can't believe humans would dare try to sell his daughter into slavery. Arthur calmly reminds Alduin that elves have been guilty of slave trading themselves, so humans aren't the only ones at fault. Varian cuts in, curious how Arthur managed to free Tesha from such dangerous men. Arthur casually states that he killed all of the slave traders himself. One guard immediately objects, yelling there's no way a kid could pull that off alone. But Varian shuts him down instantly, telling him to keep his mouth shut unless he wants to lose his job. Arthur seems completely genuine, so Alduin says he believes him. With everything cleared up, Arthur mentions there's one more thing he'd like to ask. As he told them, he ended up here after being attacked by bandits, and now he just wants their help getting back home. Alduin's temper flares again at the thought of a human asking a favor from the elven royal family. But Arthur did bring Tesha home safely, so returning the favor is only fair. Plus, Alduin knows very well that if he says no, Tesha's tantrums will make his life miserable. He quickly backs down and agrees to help. But there's one major hitch: the teleportation gate leading to Sapin is sealed shut and can only be opened once every 7 years when the leaders of the 3 tribes meet. Since the last meeting was 2 years ago, Arthur would have to wait another 5 whole years for the portal to open again. Arthur's not thrilled about waiting 5 whole years, and Alduin doesn't like the idea of keeping a human inside a Lenoir that long either. So instead, Alduin says he'll assign a squad of soldiers to escort Arthur back to Sapin. He wants him gone as soon as possible. But since it's already late, he agrees to let Arthur rest for the night and head out in the morning. Arthur thanks him for arranging the escort, but the pain in his chest has gotten a lot worse, and it's clear Varian notices something isn't right. A bit later, a room is prepared for Arthur in the castle. He tries to relax by taking a bath, but the pain just keeps building, and he's starting to worry it's serious. Afterward, he steps out onto the balcony, hoping some fresh air might help ease it a little. The air does help a bit, but the pain hasn't gone anywhere. He knows he needs to figure out what's causing it before it becomes something he can't ignore. Looking up, he spots Tesha with her parents on the balcony above. Seeing that moment between them makes him think about his own parents. He still doesn't know if they made it out of the bandit attack alive, but deep down, he believes they did. His parents are strong. They had to survive. Still, he wishes he could talk to them, just wants to know for sure. Tesha looks down and notices him standing alone. She can tell something's bothering him. Once she finishes talking with her parents, she walks over to check on him. When she reaches him, she apologizes for how her father acted earlier. Arthur brushes it off. He says it makes sense. After everything that's happened between humans and elves, it's only natural for Alduin to be cautious, especially with Tesha involved. Talking about parents reminds Arthur of how far away he is from his own. He starts wondering if they'll even be happy to see him again. They were only on that trip because of him, so part of him feels like this is his fault. He also can't help blaming himself for not being strong enough to protect them when the bandits attacked. That guilt's been sitting on his shoulders since day one, but Tesha doesn't let him spiral. She grabs his face with both hands and shakes his head like she's snapping him out of it. She doesn't know much about Arthur's parents, but if they're anything like hers, she's sure they'll be overjoyed the moment they see him again. Out of nowhere, the hallway starts glowing as a swarm of fireflies drifts in, lighting the space with a warm shimmer. Caught in the moment, Arthur finds himself thinking back to his parents and the way they used to smile at him. Ever since his rebirth into this world, they've always shown him love. Not once did they make him feel like he wasn't wanted. So what was he even afraid of? Thinking they'd turn on him after everything that happened. He realizes he's been letting the baggage from his past life creep in and mess with his judgment. That old paranoia has been clouding how he sees people. He even doubted Tesha earlier, thinking she might have betrayed him. But standing here now looking at her, all he sees is a kind-hearted girl who'd never hurt a friend. Then, in a split second, Arthur senses something flying straight at Tesha. He reacts instantly, snatching it out of the air and powering up his mana ready to strike back. But when he spots who threw it, he freezes. It was Varian. Arthur's stunned. The idea that Varian would attack his own granddaughter hits hard. Varian calmly explains that he never meant to harm Tesha. What he threw were just fireflies, and she wouldn't have felt a thing. Still, he's impressed that Arthur picked up on the threat and responded that fast. Turns out this whole stunt was a test. Varian needed to see for himself whether Arthur really had the power to take down those slave traders. After that quick reaction, there's no doubt left in his mind, because Arthur wasn't bluffing. Tesha rushes over, telling Virion to quit messing with Arthur. But he's not here to play games. He spotted something interesting in Arthur earlier and wants to test it in a proper spar. Without wasting time, Virion conjures up a sword using magic and hands it to Arthur, then casually lifts Tesha off the ground and out of the way to keep her safe. Arthur agrees to the match. Then he charges forward, swings with everything he's got, but Virion's already gone. Even after boosting his speed with mana, Arthur still can't keep up. Just when he thinks he's found an opening, Virion casually smacks Arthur's sword with his palm and shatters it completely. A shard from the broken blade flies toward Tesha, but Arthur quickly hurls the rest of the sword at it, knocking it away before it reaches her. He doesn't stop there. With nothing left in hand, he lunges at Virion using pure mana. But Virion counters effortlessly with his own energy. His strength is on a completely different level, and Arthur's clearly outmatched. Still, quitting isn't in his nature. After getting blown back, he digs in, charges again, and manages to land a solid hit right on Virion's forehead. It doesn't do much damage, but Virion's impressed. Arthur actually slipped through his guard and landed a blow. He's fired up and ready for another round until Tesha sneaks in and pinches him from behind, scolding him for going overboard. Arthur says it's fine. In fact, he feels honored that someone as strong as Virion even thought about testing him. While the energy's still high, Virion looks Arthur in the eye and says he wants to take him in as a disciple. Arthur's caught off guard. That kind of offer isn't something he expected. But Virion's dead serious. He asks Arthur if he's willing to accept. Arthur's not sure what to say. His mind jumps straight to his parents. He hasn't even told them he's alive yet, if that's the only issue. Virion says he has a way for Arthur to talk to them right now. Arthur's interested, but before he can respond, that sharp pain hits his chest again, stronger than before. Virion notices right away and tells him the truth. Arthur has inherited a beast's will, and if he doesn't become Virion's disciple, that power will end up destroying him. After taking in all that terrible news, Arthur heads to bed, but his mind won't shut off. Between being away from his family and the thought that he might not make it out alive, the anxiety eats away at him until he slips into a nightmare. He finds himself trapped, haunted by some sleep paralysis demon clinging to his chest. Then he hears someone calling his name. He opens his eyes and sees Tesha sitting on top of him. She's been trying to wake him for a while, but he kept mumbling about some kind of monster. She's clearly getting annoyed, tells him to hurry up and get dressed. Virion's already waiting for him outside. Arthur climbs out of bed and starts changing. While he's pulling on his clothes, Tesha asks if he's really planning to stay and become her grandpa's disciple. Arthur still isn't sure. It all depends on whether Virion can actually help him contact his family. If he can at least talk to his parents and let them know he's okay, that would be enough. Once he's ready, Arthur and Tesha head downstairs together. But as soon as they open the doors, they hear Alduin yelling at Virion. He can't believe Virion's considering letting Arthur live in the Elf Kingdom. Taking in a human as a disciple would break generations of tradition. But Virion doesn't care. He likes Arthur and has already made up his mind. Tesha jumps in to defend Arthur, but Alduin immediately shuts her down, saying it's obvious she wants Arthur to stay. Virion isn't interested in hearing Alduin's side either. He cuts him off and tells Arthur and Tesha to get in the carriage. They've got somewhere to be. The trip is long, and before they reach their destination, Tesha falls asleep. Arthur looks over at Virion and asks if it's going to take much longer. Only this time he calls him Grandpa. Virion cracks a smile, clearly amused at how fast Arthur ditched the formalities. But if things go well and Arthur ends up staying under his guidance, then he's basically part of the family anyway. Virion doesn't mind the casual tone. In fact, he's happy Tesha finally has someone around. She's the only child in line for the throne, and most other kids keep their distance. Even the ones who did try to befriend her ended up hurting her in some way. That's left her guarded and slow to trust. But with Arthur, she lights up, laughs, plays, and just enjoys being a kid. For that, Virion couldn't be more grateful. Arthur's not the most trusting person either, but when he looks at Virion, all he sees is a genuine, warm-hearted old man. There's nothing fake about him, just someone who feels safe to trust. For the first time in a while, Arthur lets his guard down a bit. The carriage finally reaches their destination, and Arthur gently wakes Tesha. They all step out together, and Arthur's curiosity starts building. If someone as powerful as Virion made the trip out here, then whoever they're visiting must be seriously important. Virion stomps up to the door and yells for Rhenia to show herself already. He leans in to listen, only to get smacked right in the face when the door swings open. After shaking it off, he introduces her as a special kind of mage. one he believes can help Arthur reach out to his family. Rhaenyra invites them inside so they can get started. The place looks like any regular home, and all Arthur sees is a simple bucket of water on the table, which makes him wonder how any of this is supposed to help. Rhaenyra explains that she's a seer, a rare type of mage who can glimpse fragments of someone's past or future. She gives Arthur a quick reading and immediately picks up on how unusual he is. There are pieces of his past she can't even access, though she admits her visions are never complete anyway. But Arthur isn't here to learn about his past. He just wants to make sure his family knows he's alive and okay. Rhaenyra nods, pushes the bucket toward him, and tells him to focus on his parents. The clearer he imagines them, the better the result will be. She activates her power, and in just a few moments, Arthur starts seeing his parents. Alice is in the kitchen, finishing a pot of stew that's clearly meant for more than 2 people. Reynolds loves this dish, but neither of them has much of an appetite anymore. Arthur's absence hangs heavy over the house, and as far as they know, he died when he fell off that cliff. Reynolds blamed himself to the point where he nearly became an alcoholic. But with Alice pregnant, he couldn't fall apart completely. They had to stop searching and move to the city, where Reynolds quickly picked up work. In a matter of weeks, he made enough to get them a new home. But none of that changed how they felt. No job or fresh start could ease the pain of losing their son. Then out of nowhere, they hear Arthur's voice. It fills the room, but they can't see him anywhere, and their first thought is that they're hearing his ghost. Arthur tells them he's still alive and currently staying in the elf kingdom of Elenoir. He doesn't fully understand how the magic works, but thanks to a friend, he's using a special type of spell to reach them. He wants to come home more than anything, but he can't not yet. Something's wrong with his body, and unless he finds a way to fix it, he won't survive. Still, he promises he'll return as soon as he recovers, even though he has no idea how long that might take. He also begs them not to blame themselves for what happened. This was his decision, and if he had to make the same call again to keep them safe, he wouldn't think twice. Reynolds and Alice are overwhelmed with joy just hearing his voice again, but having to let go of him a second time breaks Arthur's heart. Even so, he's grateful for the chance to speak with them. It makes one thing clear: he never wants them to worry like that again. But to protect them, he needs to grow stronger. That's why he asked Varian to make him his disciple. Now all that's left is getting Alduin to approve Arthur living in the castle. Alduin still refuses. His hatred for humans runs deep. But Tesha steps up and reminds him that Arthur saved her life. If he kicks Arthur out now, people will see him as a bitter and ungrateful savage. Alduin tries to argue that Arthur's presence could stir up serious issues in the kingdom, but Varian already planned for that. He tells Alduin to make a public announcement that Arthur is officially his disciple, and with Varian's influence, no one would dare protest or question it. With that, Arthur is granted permission to stay in the royal palace. After the meeting ends, Alduin walks over to him and apologizes for the way he acted earlier. He may still dislike humans, but Arthur doesn't seem like the others. And more importantly, Arthur saved his daughter. As a father, that's something he can't ignore. He tells Arthur that from now on, he can think of himself as part of the family. Arthur stands there, surprised at how quickly both Alduin and Muriel changed their tone. Then again, with both Varian and Tesha backing him up hard, it's not that surprising Alduin finally gave in. Arthur thanks him and says it's an honor to be welcomed into the royal castle. But Tesha cuts in, saying that's not enough. If Arthur's really going to be part of their lives now, then she wants him to be allowed to play outside with her. Considering Alduin already accepted him, he sees no problem with that and agrees to let them go out together. With permission granted, Tesha grabs Arthur's hand and pulls him into town, excited to show him around. Arthur's once again amazed by how vibrant and unique elven culture feels. Tesha knows the area well and tells Arthur there's a snack shop down the road that sells some of the best stuff, but it's super popular, and if they don't hurry, it'll all be gone. She tugs on his arm, rushing him forward, and Arthur's happy to go along with her until he accidentally bumps into a kid along the way. It was clearly a mistake, but the kid immediately starts throwing insults, yelling at Arthur for getting his filthy human germs on him. Arthur's standing there, wondering how this kid's got the nerve to talk like that. Tesha tells him to let it go. It's not worth the trouble. Normally Arthur would have agreed and walked away, but then the kid, whose name is Faerith, starts talking trash to Tesha, saying she shouldn't be hanging out with human garbage like Arthur and should be spending her time with someone like him instead. Turns out Faerith's from elven nobility and clearly thinks he's hot stuff, so Arthur decides to have a little fun with him. He smiles and acts like he's honored to meet him, then purposely mispronounces his name as Fartrith. Faerith loses it, but Arthur plays innocent, saying sorry like it was a slip-up. He tells him next time, he'll make sure to show the proper respect and turns to leave with Tesha. But Faerith doesn't let him go, for all his arrogance, but he's not dumb. He knows Arthur's messing with him and refuses to let the insult slide. He steps forward and challenges Arthur to a duel, saying the honor of his family name is at stake. Arthur stares at him, trying to process the fact that this kid's seriously dumb enough to throw down over a nickname. Tesha jumps in and tells Faerith he's taking this way too far, even for a noble. Faerith fires back, saying it's completely normal to challenge someone who disrespects your name. But Tesha reminds him that Arthur isn't just anybody, he's Varian's disciple now, and it would be unbelievably dumb to pick a fight with someone trained by the strongest man in the kingdom. Faerith doesn't care. He's convinced there's no way he could lose to a human. He tells Arthur that if he backs down now, it'll bring shame to Varian's name. Arthur stands there still trying to process how this even turned into a duel. Back in his old world, a duel meant one thing: someone dies. So it doesn't make sense for a kid to throw out a challenge like that over a name. But the amused looks on the nearby adults make it clear this isn't that kind of duel. No one seems all that worried. So Arthur has no reason to say no. Tesha asks if he's really sure about doing this, and Arthur nods, saying he's fine with it. The duel becomes official, and both sides get ready. As it kicks off, Faerith charges in with a stick in hand, full of confidence. But confidence only gets you so far. Arthur waits, lets him get close, then drops him with a clean punch to the face. Faerith's out cold before he even knows what hit him. His friends rush over panicking, but Tesha's completely unfazed. She figured it would end like this. Since the duel's over, she grabs Arthur's hand and pulls him away. She's still got plans and doesn't want to waste the day. The two of them spend the whole afternoon wandering through shops and stores, checking out everything the town has to offer. After a while, they take a break on a quiet balcony. Tesha asks when Arthur's training with Varian is supposed to begin. Arthur tells her it starts tomorrow morning, but it's obvious something's weighing on him. He thinks back to what Varian told him. This training won't be easy. It's gonna be brutal, like getting dunked in boiling tar day after day, for years, with no support from his family. Varian needed to be sure he was ready. But Arthur didn't flinch, said yes on the spot. Even now, knowing what's ahead, Arthur's fired up. He's ready to face whatever comes, no matter how rough it gets, because he wants to be strong enough to build the future he's been dreaming about. Tesha tells him she'll work just as hard so she won't fall behind. But right now, she wants to enjoy what's left of their day. Says they should go grab more snacks. A few years pass, and both Arthur and Tesha have been training under Varian the whole time. They've grown closer over the years, but Tesha's still super competitive, so every session turns into a full-on battle. Today's no different, they've both been pushing hard, and by the time they're done, Tesha is completely out of energy. While she's resting, Varian decides it's a good time to give Arthur a deeper lesson on magic. He explains that once someone stabilizes their mana, they can start using elemental magic: fire, water, earth, or wind, but what elements a person can control usually depends heavily on their race. Elves, for example, are naturally strong with wind and have decent skill with water and earth, but they generally suck at fire. Dwarves, on the other hand, are beasts with fire and earth, but weak when it comes to wind or water. Humans are different, though they have the potential to use all four elements. But how strong they are with each one depends a lot on their training and individual affinity. Tesha lifts her hand and asks why Varian hasn't told Arthur to train his mana core if it's so important. Varian answers that Arthur's not ready. His body's still too fragile. That beast will inside him might be powerful, but it messes with the connection between his body and his mana core. That's what's been causing all the pain in his chest. So before Arthur can do proper mana training, he needs to reassimilate his core first. Tesha jokes that this means she's technically stronger than Arthur right now, and he snaps back that of course she is. All her attacks are boosted with mana. Among elves, it's considered impressive if someone awakens their mana by the age of 10. Tesha did it at 9, and she's been training with Arthur ever since. With Arthur's progress going well, Varian tells him it's time to awaken his beast will. If everything works, that pain in his chest should finally stop. Arthur nods, says he's grateful for all the help, and tells Varian to get started. Arthur sits down, and Varian begins the process. Tesha stands nearby, clearly nervous, unsure if Arthur's going to be okay. Varian admits Arthur might feel a little discomfort, but it shouldn't be anything serious. Then he activates the awakening and Arthur immediately lets out a scream. A huge burst of energy shoots out from his body, sending both Varian and Tesha flying backward. The awakening worked technically speaking, but the pressure it put on Arthur's body knocked him out cold. Varian and Tesha were both on edge after that, rushing him back to the castle and laying him in bed so he could recover. When Arthur finally wakes up, the first thing he sees is Varian sitting beside the bed. Varian asks if he's feeling alright, and Arthur nods, saying he feels okay. That's when Varian leans in and asks if there was anything unusual about the beast Will he received. A reaction that intense is rare, even among strong beast tamers. Arthur had planned to keep his meeting with Sylvia a secret, but at this point there's no use hiding it. He looks at Varian and tells him the truth: the beast Will came from a dragon. Varian freezes, stunned by the confession. It's hard to believe, but the power coming off Arthur's body does feel close to what he'd expect from a dragon. He tells Arthur he can't let anyone know about this. If word got out, people from all over would come looking for him, and none of them would have good intentions. With that out of the way, Varian tells Arthur he's scheduled to return home in 4 months. Arthur is caught off guard. He thought he still had 2 more years before the next inter-race gathering, but it turns out there's been a new cultural exchange program arranged, and the portals to Xyrus City will open way sooner than expected. Arthur asks if Tesha knows, since she'd take it hard, but Varian tells him the king and queen are talking to her about it right now. That night, Arthur lies in bed with the egg Sylvia left him, still trying to process the idea of leaving Tesha behind in just 4 months. While he's thinking, he notices the egg beginning to crack. Moments later, a small baby dragon hatches right in front of him. At first, Arthur's worried, but the dragon turns out to be cute and calm, at least for a second. He gently picks it up, only for the little thing to sink its teeth into his arm. Arthur pulls back in pain, dropping it, but instead of regular bite marks, a glowing crest appears where he was bitten. The mark links Arthur and the dragon together, letting him feel its emotions even if he doesn't fully understand them. Since he's going to be the one raising her now, he decides to give her a name, calls her Sylvie, in honor of her mother Sylvia. Arthur drifts back to sleep, but a few hours later, Tesha quietly enters his room. She wants to talk about him leaving in 4 months, but when she pulls the covers back to wake him up, she spots Sylvie curled up next to him. The sight instantly makes her forget what she came for. Arthur wakes up startled, thinking something's wrong, but then he sees Tesha just melting over how adorable Sylvie looks, so he rolls over and goes back to sleep. Later that day, Arthur and Tesha head to the training grounds for their session with Varian. Along the way, Tesha keeps trying her best to win Sylvie's affection, but after nearly squeezing the life out of her earlier, Sylvie's keeping a safe distance. When they reach Varian, his eyes land on Sylvie resting on Arthur's head, and he completely freaks out. He never thought he'd see a real dragon in his lifetime. While Tesha continues messing with Sylvie, Arthur explains that she hatched during his beast Will awakening yesterday. He wonders if keeping a baby dragon around might be risky. People could figure out what she really is, but Varian assures him there's nothing to worry about. Dragons are basically myths at this point. No one would ever guess Sylvie's a dragon. Arthur can just claim she's some rare creature that looks dragon-like and leave it at that. With that cleared up, Varian says it's time to get started. Now that Arthur has awakened his beast Will, he'll need to train both his beast core and mana core at the same time. The only real way to do that is through experience, so Varian begins to transform. Once the transformation is complete, Varian tells Arthur his training starts now. Arthur gets ready, expecting an attack, but the moment Varian steps forward, he disappears. Arthur tries defending, but he can't track him. He knows Varian is still around, but no matter how hard he looks, there's no sign of where the attack will come from. It's an incredible ability, but Arthur isn't trying to get wrecked as part of a lesson, so he throws his hands up and surrenders immediately. As soon as he gives up, Varian reappears right behind him. Arthur complains, saying there's no way he can fight that. Varian could have hit him with a 30-hit combo, and he wouldn't even know what happened. That's the power of a Shadow Panther's beast Will. It gives Varian the ability to manipulate wind so precisely that he can erase every sound he makes while moving. Varian's transformation looks amazing, but it's far from flawless. It drains a ridiculous amount of mana. Not that it mattered much, since he never planned to fight Arthur in that form anyway. He mostly just wanted to show off a little. After giving Arthur a good taste of what a beast Will can do, he summons a sword and tells him it's time to start the real training. A few days pass, and Arthur's already showing big progress with his beast Will. The pain in his chest has finally stopped, and his body's gotten strong enough to keep up with Varian's shadow movements. But more than that, he's finally been able to enjoy life like a normal kid, spending the rest of his time hanging out with Tesha. One day, while Arthur and Tesha are out together again, they run into Faerith in the middle of the street. Arthur doesn't recognize him at all, which ticks Faerith off, so he immediately challenges Arthur to another duel. As expected, it doesn't go well. Faerith ends up flat on the ground in half a second, and his friends just stand there wondering how he lost so fast. Arthur still doesn't remember him, him, so Tesha reminds him that this was the same kid who challenged him to a duel years ago. Arthur laughs, saying that day was actually kind of fun. He offers Faerith a hand to help him up as a friend, and Faerith takes it, finally deciding he's done trying to fight Arthur. Arthur then asks if Faerith and his friends are going to be part of the upcoming cultural exchange, and Faerith proudly confirms it. He says he was chosen because of his great skill, but the truth is every noble kid got selected automatically. Arthur turns to Tesha and asks if she's going too, but Faerith jumps in and says no. The royal family doesn't want to risk their delicate little princess getting kidnapped again. While that sounds reasonable, Tesha doesn't take it well being called helpless ticks her off, and without thinking, she punches Faerith square in the face and sends him flying. He's out cold from the hit, and now Tesha's standing over him like nothing happened. Arthur quickly grabs her and drags her away before a crowd gathers. Once they get far enough from the scene, Arthur starts scolding her, saying a princess can't just go around punching people whenever she feels like it. Even if Faerith had it coming, it still looks bad. Though honestly, with the kind of past Arthur lived, he's not exactly one to lecture anyone about violence. Tesha doesn't see what the big deal is. She's pretty sure Faerith's still breathing, but Arthur keeps nagging her like her dad. So she calls him an old fart and takes off crying her eyes out. After dark, Tesha's still in her room crying her heart out. So to cheer her up, Arthur quietly sneaks up to her window and invites her to come take a walk through the forest. She agrees, and as they stroll under the moonlight, she asks if this is really okay. Arthur tells her not to worry if they happen to run into kidnappers. They're strong enough to handle it or get away. Besides, the view under the night sky is totally worth the risk. He checks if she's starting to feel sleepy, and though her eyes are barely staying open, she insists she's fine. Arthur tells her she can rest if she wants, but since this might be the last night they spend together like this, Tesha says she's staying up no matter what. She's so drowsy she starts seeing monsters hiding in the trees. Arthur laughs, teasing her for still being afraid of ghosts at her age. Tesha snaps back that she's not scared of ghosts, and that she's only shaking because it's cold. To prove it, she tosses more wood into the fire. Then she asks Arthur to tell her something about the human kingdom, hoping it'll help her stay awake. But Arthur admits he doesn't know much about it himself. He's never actually been there. Tesha says she wishes he could stay here forever. Arthur says he'd love that too, but doing that would mean giving up on ever seeing his family again. He looks over to keep talking, but Tesha's already fast asleep, so he pulls the blanket over her and calls it a night. Eventually, the day of Arthur's departure arrives. Before he goes, Virion gives him a special gift, a magical compass that will always point toward the elf kingdom. In case Arthur ever wants to return, Arthur thanks him, but when he looks around he realizes Tesha isn't there. He asks if anyone has seen her, but it turns out she couldn't bring herself to watch him leave. The portal finally opens, and Arthur is about to step through when he suddenly hears his name. Tesha comes running down the street, trying to catch him before he's gone, but halfway there, she trips and falls, so Arthur rushes over. He helps her up and starts rambling, telling him he better take care of himself or she'll never forgive him. Arthur knows how much she's holding back right now, so he gently pulls her into one last hug. He tells her how much he's going to miss her. After reaching the city of Xyrus, Arthur finally reunites with his family and finds out he's now got a little sister. Her name's Eleanor, and Alice and Reynolds have been telling her stories about Arthur for years, so she's hyped to finally meet him. They all head inside, and right away Alice starts asking if he's been doing okay. Last time he reached out, he mentioned being sick, so she wants to know if he managed to recover. Arthur tells her he's doing fine and there's no need to stress about it, but he knows they deserve to hear what happened. So he begins telling them about everything he went through after they got separated. He leaves out the part about Sylvia and the beast will though. Instead, he talks about meeting Tesha and the time he spent living in the elf kingdom while working on his condition. Alice checks again, asking if he's really alright, since if anything went wrong now, they wouldn't have the means to help. Arthur reassures her it's not going to happen again. He can't tell them the full truth about the beast will, so he says it was because he awakened too early and that messed up his mana core. Arthur doesn't feel great lying to them, but until he's strong enough to handle the fallout, it's safer to keep some parts to himself. That's when Reynolds notices Sylvie. He asks where Arthur picked her up. So Arthur quickly makes something up and says he found her in a mana beast's den. He brought her back and made her his pet, and Eleanor seems to like her a lot. Anyway, Reynolds still has more on his mind, so he stands up and asks Arthur what level his mana core is at now. Alice immediately scolds him, saying he shouldn't be picking a fight with their son right after he got home. But Reynolds says he's just curious to see how far Arthur's come. Arthur doesn't take it personally, but before answering anything else, he wants to know what kind of job Reynolds has to afford such a nice place. Reynolds explains that he's a security instructor at the Helstia auction house, and his mana core is currently dark orange. Arthur's impressed by that, especially since hitting orange is no small feat. Mana cores go from black up to white, and the closer you get to white, the stronger your core becomes. Reynolds has always been a weird kind of mentor, so it makes sense he's constantly working on his body. But turns out, all that time, he was training his mana core too. Reynolds is clearly proud of himself, so he leans forward and asks Arthur where his core is at now. Arthur casually tells him he's already reached light red. Reynolds lets out a loud damn when he realizes Arthur is almost on his tail. Forgetting Eleanor's in the room. Now she's stomping around the place, throwing out dams at the couch, and even baby Sylvie. Reynolds still can't wrap his head around the fact that Arthur is just one step away from passing him in strength. There's no way he's letting that slide, so he challenges Arthur to a sparring match in the garden right now. Arthur is down for it, but before they can even make it outside, the doors swing open and Vincent walks in, asking if Reynolds' boy is back yet. Reynolds introduces him as Vincent Helstia, the guy who owns the auction house and technically his boss. Vincent and his wife Tabitha are both excited to finally meet Arthur after hearing so much about him, and Arthur returns the respect, saying it's an honor. Vincent's a bit surprised at how polite Arthur is. He knows for a fact that didn't come from Reynolds. Soon after, they introduce Arthur to their daughter Lilia. She's quiet at first, not saying much, until her eyes land on Sylvie sitting on Arthur's shoulder, asks if she can pet Sylvie, and once Arthur gives the nod, she's hugging Sylvie like they've known each other for years. While Lilia is busy cuddling, Reynolds pulls Arthur aside and tells him that since Vincent technically owns the house, they might want to get his permission before breaking anything. Vincent immediately gets suspicious the moment he hears Reynolds say the word spar, and his fears come true once he realizes Reynolds and Arthur are getting ready to fight in the garden. Everyone heads out to watch, but Vincent still has doubts, asks if it's really okay for Arthur to spar with Reynolds, because it's hard to believe a kid that age has reached light red core already. Alice reminds him that Arthur's always picked up things fast, and besides, he's got no reason to lie. Tabitha tells him to sit back and enjoy the show. Truth is, Arthur could have reached orange long ago, but his beast will training meant he had to put the mana core stuff on hold. Even so, he's more than ready to show off a few new tricks he's been sitting on for a while. As soon as the spar kicks off, Arthur and Reynolds start trading hits. Reynolds is surprised at how far Arthur's come, though he still manages to push him back with raw strength. After a few exchanges, some space opens up between them, and Reynolds decides it's time to turn things up. He wraps his hand in flames and gives Arthur the chance to back out now if he's not ready. In this world, every mage has an elemental affinity, something they naturally connect with. Conjurers can shape and cast these elements with ease, but it's not so simple for augmenters. Still, once an augmenter reaches a high enough level, they can tap into their affinity and use it to enhance their physical attacks. That's what Reynolds is doing now, and it makes him a whole lot tougher to deal with. Not planning to fall behind, Arthur charges mana into his arms and goes all in. They clash again, this time more evenly matched, but Reynolds still hits hard enough to send Arthur flying. Luckily, Arthur's time training under Varian gave him a serious head start. With all the knowledge from his past life backing him, he was able to master fire magic quicker than expected, and Varian encouraged him to push even further. Arthur gathers mana again, but instead of fire, sparks begin to dance across his skin. He's generating lightning now. Reynolds can hardly believe what he's seeing. Arthur is actually using an advanced form of fire magic. But Arthur isn't done. While he's channeling lightning, he reaches behind with his other hand and bends the water from a nearby fountain, sending a wave of it straight at Reynolds. Reynolds blocks the water, but he's completely stunned. Not only can Arthur use lightning, but he's using both fire and water in the same fight. He's so proud of Arthur that he just pulls him in and gives him a big hug, asking how in the world he learned to do all that and whether he's hiding any more surprises. Arthur admits he's only recently figured out how to summon lightning, and he's still working on controlling it better, but he's getting there. Elena runs over to check on both of them, while off to the side, Vincent and Tabitha are standing there speechless. What Arthur just pulled off isn't something any normal kid should be able to do. Later that night, the whole group gathers for dinner, and Vincent just won't stop bragging about how unbelievable Arthur is. Reynolds laughs and says he knew Arthur was different the moment he awakened his mana at just 3 years old. That's wild to Vincent, since even the most talented kids don't awaken before 8, and they definitely don't blow up their own house in the process. Reynolds starts laughing so hard at the memory that he ends up tipping right out of his chair. Once the table quiets down a bit, Vincent throws out an idea: Arthur should enroll in Xyrus Academy. That catches Reynolds off guard since he never imagined something like that. Xyrus is the kind of place where the elite send their kids, not a regular boy from their background. But Tabitha supports the idea and even offers to sponsor Arthur's tuition herself, saying a kid with that kind of talent is destined for greatness. Alice is a little uneasy about it. The Helstias have already helped their family a lot, and now they want to pay for Arthur's schooling too. Plus Arthur's still just 8, and the academy doesn't usually accept students under 10. Vincent says he already considered that part, and thanks to his job, he has a good relationship with the academy's director. If he explains Arthur's situation, he's confident she'll make an exception. But before he can get any deeper into his pitch, Arthur speaks up. He says it would have been nice if they asked how he felt before making plans for his life. He's only just reunited with his family and wants to enjoy that for a while before jumping into anything else. Then he politely excuses himself and walks out into the hall, still not used to the layout of the house. As he wanders, Lilia calls out and warns him not to head toward the basement unless he wants to get lost. She offers to show him around instead, and since Arthur's got nothing better to do, he follows her. She brings him to one of the side rooms where the house servants usually hang out. Everyone in there already knows who Arthur is after all. He's the kid who torched the garden earlier during that wild match with Reynolds. Arthur feels bad and apologizes, but no one seems too upset about it. Lilia asks Maria if there's any leftover duck, and Maria says there is, but teases her to watch how much she eats, since she's already been packing on some extra weight lately. One of the staff quietly mentions that Lilia tends to come here whenever things start feeling too much for her. Her parents have been piling on the pressure, pushing her through non-stop lessons because they want her to awaken as a mage. Sure, Lilia wants that too, but it's a lot for a kid to handle, and sometimes she just needs a space to breathe. That night, Arthur is chilling with his parents, enjoying the time they've got together. Even though he looks older and acts more mature, they can tell deep down he's still their Arthur. They're proud of how talented he's become. And yeah, he's likely going to be an amazing mage one day, but it wouldn't matter either way. They'd love him just the same no matter what. They'd stick around and chat more, but they figure he's probably worn out from everything, so they both wish him a good night. Before they leave the room though, Reynolds brings up what Vincent mentioned earlier. He doesn't want to seem like he's pushing anything, but every word Vincent said came from a good place. He tells Arthur nobody's forcing him to enroll in that school if it's not something he wants. The following morning, Arthur rushes downstairs because he hears he's got visitors. Turns out the twin horns are here. They heard Arthur was back and came to check in. He's glad to see them, but Angela's even more excited. She runs up and pulls him into a huge hug like she's afraid to let go. Once she finally releases him, Arthur greets the rest of the group, but then Jasmine steps forward and starts patting him down. At first it's a little weird, but she's just making sure he didn't end up with any lasting injuries. After checking, she pulls him into a hug and says sorry for everything. She feels guilty for not being able to protect him the day they got separated, and now that she sees he's okay, it's a huge relief. They all sit down not long after to catch up, and Arthur finds out that twin horns were working in a distant city called Ediston. They got a pretty rewarding job out there, but had to come back to the capital for another commission. Listening to their stories hits Arthur hard. He realizes he barely knows anything about the kingdom of Sapin, let alone the whole Dicathan continent. Living as an adventurer could open his eyes to a lot, but the thought of walking away from his family again is something he's not sure he can deal with right now. A few days pass, and Arthur's back in his room trying to master his beast will. He figures out it gives him the ability to stop time, but at his current level, he can only freeze things for a couple seconds, and it completely wipes him out whenever he tries. He's starting to wonder if all this pain is even worth it for some power he barely understands. But then he remembers he's doing all this to protect the people he loves. No matter how tough it gets, he's not about to quit now. First things first though, Arthur realizes Sylvie stinks something fierce, so he immediately carries her off for a bath. Sylvie absolutely hates baths, but Arthur's not about to let her toxic fumes ruin his stay in this fancy mansion. And talking about mansions, seeing as the Helstia family owns a crib this luxurious, their auction house must be seriously profitable. But Arthur doesn't really know the details. After finally finishing Sylvie's bath, he's drying her off on his bed when his family busts in and announces it's his turn to get cleaned up. Arthur didn't exactly keep up appearances during his stay in the Elf Kingdom, so his mom takes him straight to her favorite hairdresser, who swears he'll look amazing afterward. Honestly, he looks pretty much the same except his hair's slightly shorter, but everyone's hyping him up, saying he's rocking a fresh new look. Arthur's confused about why they're suddenly so focused on his style, so Tabitha explains they're planning on giving him a tour of their auction house. The Helstia auction house is so high class that even the royal family shows up from time to time, so there was no way they'd let him walk in looking like some kind of caveman. Tabitha then suggests they take Arthur around Xyrus City while they're at it, and Elena quickly announces she's coming along too, because she wants some quality time with her big brother. Lilia feels a slight pang of jealousy before Arthur returned. Elena always stuck with her, but she also wants to spend time with Arthur, so it's not a big deal. They end up spending the entire day hanging out, playing a ring toss game near a statue. Everything's cool until, out of nowhere, some random group of dudes tosses a ring right at Arthur's head and strolls off like nothing happened. Arthur is genuinely confused, so he asks Lilia if she's got any idea why those guys acted so disrespectfully. She tells him those are students from Xyrus Academy, and they behave like that because wearing their uniforms practically makes them royalty around town. Arthur's pretty annoyed. He didn't expect to deal with these stuck-up academy kids out here, but decides it's better to just brush it off for now. A short while later, Arthur senses some strange energy coming from a nearby shop, so he heads over to investigate. His parents explain that this particular store sells beast cores. Arthur is shocked. He never knew beast cores could just be bought and sold like this, since he'd never seen it in the elf kingdom. But apparently, it's pretty normal here in the human kingdom. Tabitha fills him in, saying beast cores can help boost a mage strength, and if a core has a beast's will inside, it could fetch as much as 100 gold coins. To put it simply, that's enough money for Arthur's family to live comfortably for about 250 years. Tabitha tells Arthur their auction house is actually going to sell some beast cores soon, so if he's curious, she could let him touch one. Arthur appreciates the offer, but he's not especially interested since he's happy enough with the beast core he already got from Sylvia. At that point, Lilia jumps into the conversation and asks her mother if she can buy a beast core herself. But Tabitha firmly refuses, explaining that just getting a beast core doesn't guarantee she'll awaken magical abilities, and besides, it's way too expensive for someone her age. Lilia tries to push it a bit more, but Tabitha stands firm, making it clear that discussion is closed. Afterward, they head to a cafe for lunch, and Arthur quickly notices Lilia is still upset from the earlier conversation. He picked up earlier that Tabitha didn't want Lilia rushing her magical awakening, but for some reason, Lilia seems really impatient about it. Arthur is about to say something when suddenly he realizes Lilia isn't even there. Oddly enough, Tabitha was sitting right next to her but didn't say a word when Lilia quietly got up and slipped off into a dark alley nearby. Arthur immediately gets up to follow her, eventually finding Lilia inside a magic store. She's currently checking out one of the cheaper beast cores. Arthur notices she probably has enough money saved from her allowance to buy it herself, but he gently advises her to reconsider if she's absolutely sure. Even with a beast core, there's no guarantee she'll suddenly awaken magical abilities. But Lilia insists she has to at least try. She reaches out to grab the beast core anyway, but Arthur quickly grabs her hand, asking her to hold on a second because he seriously doesn't think it's a good idea. Lilia, however, doesn't want to hear Arthur's opinion. She believes someone as gifted as him couldn't possibly understand how she's feeling right now. Lilia quickly pulls away from Arthur, but in doing so, she accidentally bumps into a boy behind her, and turns out, it's those same Xyrus students from before. She immediately apologizes for running into him, but the guy's ego is way too big to accept it as an honest mistake. Instead, the boys gear up like they're ready to throw hands. The store owner hears all the noise and comes out to check what's happening, but the second he spots those Xyrus Academy uniforms, he immediately wants no part of it. He pretends he didn't see a thing and quietly slips back into his office. Now the Xyrus boys figure they're free to do whatever the hell they please, and their first thought is to burn Arthur and Lilia to a crisp. Lilia runs behind Arthur for cover, and Arthur would rather settle things peacefully. But judging by these guys' attitude, that's obviously not gonna happen. So he's preparing to knock some sense into them. Before anyone can actually swing, Tabitha and Alice show up demanding everyone immediately put away their magic. The boys don't take Tabitha seriously at first and start giving her attitude, asking who exactly she thinks she is to interfere. Even the store owner steps back out, practically begging Tabitha not to provoke these brats because they could easily destroy his whole store if they felt like it. But Tabitha calmly tells the boys that even academy students won't get away with touching the daughter of the Helstia family. The second these boys realize Lilia belongs to the Helstia family, they start freaking out. The Helstias are among the academy's biggest donors, meaning these punks would definitely be expelled if the director ever found out. They quickly leave without causing more trouble, though not without throwing one last insult, calling Lilia an incompetent trust fund baby on their way out. After that, everyone heads back home, and once there, they fill Vincent in on what happened. He's stunned to hear that Arthur and Lilia nearly ended up in a fight with some academy students. But luckily Tabitha stepped in before things got worse, especially because Arthur might have actually killed those boys if she hadn't shown up when she did. Lilia then apologizes to her father for causing trouble, but Vincent gently reassures her it's no big deal. She didn't do anything wrong, and given all the donations he's made to the academy, this little incident won't harm her chances of getting enrolled. He tells Arthur the same thing goes for him too, but Lilia's insecurities kick in, and she mistakenly thinks her dad is implying he wants Arthur enrolled at the academy instead of her. Her parents try hard to assure her that's not what they meant, but Lilia feels like a failure for still not having awakened any magic, so in her mind, her parents must see her as a failure too. She yells at them, saying she hates them both, then runs off, leaving her family completely bewildered. A couple hours pass, and it's dinner time, so Arthur goes upstairs to call Lilia down. But when he gets there, he sees she's not in her room. When Lilia was younger, Vincent would constantly tell her stories about the academy, so she always looked forward to enrolling, making her extra impatient. But she couldn't enroll until she awakened her mana, which ended up taking a lot longer than expected. Her parents always reassured her there was no need to rush, but seeing Arthur master magic at such a young age made her feel like she didn't measure up. Arthur eventually finds her sitting alone in the staff break room, and he really wants to say something comforting, but he's not sure exactly how to approach it without making it seem like he's looking down on her. Before Arthur can speak though, Lilia breaks the silence and apologizes for feeling jealous. Ever since Arthur displayed his strength, he's gotten all her father's attention, but she doesn't blame him for that. She blames herself for being incompetent. Lilia genuinely thinks her parents are disappointed in her. Arthur knows exactly the kind of self-doubt she's feeling, so he gently grabs her face and assures her she's not a disappointment. He's seen how hard she's been working, and her parents see it too. Arthur is certain they're proud of her, and the appearance of someone like him won't ever change that fact. Lilia laughs softly, realizing now how ridiculous she's been acting. Her father simply wants her to become a mage so she can be happy, which is why he's poured so much money into ensuring she'll get into the academy. She knows her parents don't want her stressing out or pushing herself too hard, but the more Vincent does to secure her spot, the more likely others will see her as some spoiled rich kid. Arthur decides he wants to help, so he asks if she's truly determined to awaken her magic, because if that's the case, he actually knows a way to speed things up. Several hours later, Arthur informs Lilia's parents that she's left the house, and they're completely caught off guard, demanding an explanation. Arthur tells them that he sent Lilia out to train so she can finally awaken her magic. But just in case they're worried, he assures them the people he sent her to are really nice. Vincent and Tabitha press Arthur about why he'd send Lilia off without getting their approval first. But Arthur calmly explains that it was Lilia herself who wanted things to go down like this. If she'd tried talking to her parents before leaving, she probably would have lost her nerve. However, she did leave behind a letter addressed to them, so Arthur pulls it out and hands it over to Vincent. In her letter, Lilia explains how she's always felt worthless because she couldn't use magic. So she decided she's going to train relentlessly until she becomes an incredible mage, no matter how many years it takes. But until then, she won't be coming back home. She ends by telling her parents to take care of themselves. Vincent collapses to his knees in anguish, realizing it's all his fault. He's the one who planted the idea in Lilia's head that she needed to become a mage to find happiness. But the truth is, magic or no magic, she'll always be his daughter, and he could never view her as useless. Right after Vincent says this, Arthur signals for Lilia to come out, and Vincent's stunned to find she'd been hiding behind the door the entire time. Vincent is completely baffled about what's happening, so Arthur quickly apologizes for tricking them. He understands how crushing it must have been to think their child suddenly vanished, and he's truly sorry for making them worry. But Arthur explains he did it to show Lilia firsthand that her parents' love doesn't depend on whether or not she can use magic. Vincent understands exactly why Arthur did it, so he's not upset at all. In fact, he now realizes just how wrong he's been. Vincent then turns to Reynold and Alice and sincerely apologizes for trying to send Arthur off to the academy right after he returned home. He also deeply apologizes to Lilia for practically pressuring her into becoming a mage. He reassures her she doesn't need to go to the academy or become a mage to have a fulfilling life. She's completely free to do whatever makes her happy. Lilia appreciates hearing that, but she confidently tells her father she still wants to attend the academy, even if awakening her magic takes a bit longer. Her goal now is to become a mage who uses magic to make others happy. Seeing her determination, Arthur says he'll personally awaken her mana. Since he's about to help Lilia awaken her mana, Arthur decides to do the same for Elena too. Both girls sit down in the middle of the room, and Arthur guides them through the process. He tells them to close their eyes, take deep breaths, and exhale slowly so they can begin sensing their mana. Elena immediately feels it, but Lilia still can't sense anything. She starts worrying maybe she really doesn't have the talent, but Arthur reassures her to stay calm and keep trying. He then gently places his hands on Elena and Lilia's backs and warns them he's about to stimulate their mana, so it might get a little warm. After Arthur finishes the process, Lilia suddenly sees glowing lights around her, finally confirming her mana has awakened, and she's absolutely overjoyed. Afterwards, Arthur and his family get invited to the Helstia auction house, and the sheer size of the place leaves them speechless. Alice worries she might not fit in at such a fancy event, but Tabitha reassures her there's nothing to worry about and says they should just relax and enjoy the evening. Tonight's auction is something both adventurers and nobles have been eagerly awaiting, because Vincent's put together a rare collection of incredible items. There's everything from magic beast cores to expensive statues imported from foreign lands. So security is extra tight tonight, and Reynolds is the man in charge of the whole guard operation. When the auction kicks off, Vincent steps onto the stage and announces some special guests joining them tonight. They're honored by the presence of the royal family from the Kingdom of Sapin, King Blaine Glader, Queen Priscilla, and their two children Prince Curtis and Princess Kathleen. Everyone erupts in cheers for the royal family, which leads Arthur to think they must be genuinely loved by their people. With the royals here, Reynolds and his team of guards stay on high alert, determined to keep things running smoothly. At the same time, Vincent begins the auction with the first item, a blade forged by a famous craftsman. The sword's been specially enhanced with mana, allowing electricity to surge through the tip. The bidding starts at 50 gold coins, but someone quickly raises the bid to 51. As more bids pile in, Arthur wonders if he'd be able to infuse an element into a weapon himself, provided the conditions were right. Just then, he spots Vincent bringing out a pair of masks, catching Arthur's interest, but at the same moment, he realizes Sylvie's gone missing. He figured she might have been playing with Lilia or Elia, but sees the two girls fast asleep nearby, prompting him to get up and start looking around for her. At the same time, Sylvie strolls carefree through the halls of the auction house, until suddenly she's stopped by the mage who arrived with the royal family. Back on stage, Vincent presents the next auction item, a rank lion cub. As soon as Prince Curtis lays eyes on it, he excitedly tells his father he wants it. Once bidding begins, King Blaine immediately offers 1,000 gold coins. Naturally, nobody dares to outbid the king, and the lion cub quickly goes to him without delay. King Blaine steps onto the stage to collect the cub, and Vincent asks him what he plans to do with it. The king says he could tame it himself, but since Curtis expressed interest in becoming a beast tamer, he intends to hand it over to his son. Meanwhile, Arthur's busy searching everywhere for Sylvie, when suddenly he hears her scream echo down the hall. He rushes over and finds the mage staring down at Sylvie. Arthur immediately recognizes him as the mage who arrived with the royal family, so he'd prefer not causing a scene here. He politely asks the mage to let Sylvie go, explaining that she's his mana beast. The mage seems disappointed. He'd assumed Sylvie was one of the items up for auction. Sylvie quickly runs to Arthur's side, and Arthur turns to leave, but the mage won't drop it. He says he's still interested in Sylvie, he's been wanting a mana beast of his own, and straight up demands Arthur hand her over. Arthur looks at him like he's lost his mind, wondering what makes the mage think he'd ever do that. But rather than accept Arthur's refusal, the mage angrily fires a blast of flame toward him, trying to intimidate him while claiming it's a royal mage's direct order. Arthur isn't impressed and decides to just walk away. That only angers the mage more, so he threatens Arthur's parents, saying they'll pay for his disrespect. Arthur can let insults slide if it's about him, but threats against his family cross a line. He turns back and dares the mage to repeat what he just said. As he speaks, Arthur unconsciously releases a terrifying wave of murderous intent, completely forgetting he's inside Vincent's auction house. His powerful aura sweeps across the entire building, shattering every window instantly. Those with strong mana like the king withstand the pressure, but those without like Vincent immediately collapse. The king rushes to check on Vincent, and his royal guards quickly form a protective circle around him, thinking the intent must be from an intruder. The king assures them he can handle himself, instructing them to protect everyone else and catch whoever caused this. Arthur quickly realizes the scale of what he's just done. Sure, he scared the mage, but he just created absolute chaos. He pulls back his murderous intent, but it's way too late. The damage is done, and panic spreads everywhere. Nobody understands what's happening, so Reynolds steps up and orders a complete evacuation until he figures things out. Because of this incident, once everyone's outside and safe, the king requests to speak privately with Reynolds. He's clearly upset with Reynolds for failing to quickly capture whoever was responsible. Reynolds sincerely apologizes for the failure, but the king says that unfortunately, he'll still need to be punished. Reynolds is ready to accept whatever punishment the king decides is fair. But before King Blaine can make a call, the royal mage interrupts. He suggests letting Reynolds off the hook since nobody actually got hurt. But the mage isn't just playing nice, he makes it clear by mentioning how much he likes the look of Arthur's mana beast. The king introduces the mage as Sebastian, explaining that he's responsible for royal security and has saved the king's life multiple times. King Blaine clearly values Sebastian's input, and hearing Sebastian mention his interest in Arthur's mana beast, he asks Reynolds if he'd be willing to give Sylvie to Sebastian as a gesture of thanks. Arthur tries to speak out, but Alice quickly stops him, reminding him it's rude to interrupt royalty. Reynolds politely responds to the king's request, telling him that he can't agree to it because Arthur acquired Sylvie entirely on his own. Reynolds has no right to just give her away, so instead, the king directly asks Arthur himself if he'd be willing to part with Sylvie. Arthur politely declines, saying nothing could ever replace Sylvie. The king then offers to trade the lion cub he just purchased for Sylvie. He argues that while Sylvie looks rare, surely the lion cub would be even more valuable. But Arthur firmly refuses again, clarifying that Sylvie isn't something he'd ever trade, sell, or give away, no matter the offer. The king's patience starts to run thin, telling Arthur he's already asked him twice, and royalty shouldn't have to repeat themselves. King Blaine asks Arthur one final time to hand over his mana beast, but Arthur's had enough of the king's persistence. He stands up, looks straight at the king, and asks if he'd ever consider selling his own children. That stuns the king into silence, but Arthur keeps going. He reminds King Blaine that he's already rejected the request 3 times. Yet the king still doesn't seem to grasp that some things aren't for sale. He asks how the king would feel if someone demanded to buy his children the way he's demanding Sylvie. Immediately, the guards rush Arthur for disrespecting the king, but Arthur effortlessly takes both of them out with a single punch each. Sebastian angrily calls the guards idiots for failing to handle one child. Determined to get Sylvie at any cost, he shoots a powerful fire spell directly at Arthur, intending to burn him to death. But Arthur instantly activates his static world ability, freezing everyone in place except for Sebastian. Sebastian looks confused, wondering why everyone suddenly stopped moving. But Arthur calmly tells him nobody here can hear a word he's saying. Arthur then slowly starts walking towards him. Sebastian nervously warns Arthur not to come closer, claiming he can't possibly beat a royal mage. Arthur doesn't respond, he simply snaps Sebastian's leg without hesitation. Sebastian cries out for help, but Arthur reminds him that no one's coming to save him right now. He advises Sebastian to shut up and listen carefully, while he still has functioning ears. Arthur warns him clearly to know his place and watch who he threatens, because if there's a next time, he won't get off this easy. A few seconds later, static world fades, and as time resumes, Arthur collapses from exhaustion. A while later, Arthur wakes up in his bed with a pounding headache, but at least he's not locked up in some prison. He realizes he might have pushed himself too far this time by freezing time, since using static world for even a few seconds seriously drained him. Just then, Alice walks in to check on him, visibly relieved to find him awake. Arthur asks her to fill him in on what happened after he passed out. Alice explains how shocked everyone was when Arthur suddenly collapsed. She immediately rushed to help him, but it still took his body a while to recover. Seeing that Arthur's doing much better now, Alice asks if he'd like to go shopping with her, and Arthur agrees, figuring a change of scenery would be good. While they're out, Arthur spots a hairpin that'd look perfect on Elena. But since he still doesn't have money, Alice buys it for him and suggests he give it to Elena as a gift later. Alice also offers to buy something for Arthur too, but he questions whether it's alright for them to spend this much, considering Reynolds might have lost his job at the auction house. Alice assures him he doesn't have to worry about their family finances, she has her own source of income. Arthur didn't realize, but Alice creates luxury items popular among nobles, earning plenty of profit, enough that they can comfortably buy whatever they like. By the time their shopping trip ends, Arthur and Alice are carrying a ton of bags home. When they get back, they overhear Reynolds in the living room telling someone he can't be bought off with money when his son was almost killed. Arthur interrupts, asking what's going on, and Reynolds is immediately relieved seeing Arthur back on his feet. Arthur reassures him he's completely fine. At that moment, the man Reynolds was speaking to realizes Arthur must be the boy from the incident and asks him to join their conversation. The messenger hands Arthur and Reynolds a bag of gold sent by the king as a small apology for the minor incident yesterday. Arthur wouldn't exactly call being attacked by 2 knights and a royal mage minor, but he decides to stay polite and simply thanks the messenger for coming all this way. The messenger, pleased to see Arthur being understanding, assures him the 2 guards who attacked him were fired after all. The king would never condone killing a child over something as trivial as rejecting a request. Reynolds, however, doesn't think just firing those knights is enough of a punishment for attacking his son. But the messenger points out that Arthur was rude to the king, and besides, the king was kind enough to forgive Reynolds' failure to protect the auction house. So Reynolds shouldn't be too upset that the knights also got some leniency. Reynolds is about to respond angrily, but Arthur cuts him off, calmly saying there's no need to stay angry. It was his fault for speaking out of turn in the first place, and he escaped without serious injury, so he's okay with letting it go. But speaking of injuries, Arthur asks about Sebastian's condition, remembering that his leg got broken. The messenger explains that Sebastian was also fired for attacking Arthur and is currently receiving medical care. Sebastian insisted it was Arthur who broke his leg, but nobody believes that because everyone was looking at Arthur the whole time, and no one saw him move. Instead, the king concluded Sebastian's own spell must have backfired, accidentally injuring himself. The king is deeply troubled that something like this happened, hence the generous apology. While the messenger admits Arthur is a good kid with obvious talent, he also warns him to be careful about how he speaks to powerful people. Not everyone will be as forgiving as the king. Arthur and Reynolds accept the apology, and once the messenger leaves, Reynolds hands all the hush money directly to Arthur. Arthur asks if Reynolds is sure about giving him all this, but Reynolds insists it's only fair, since Arthur was the one in real danger. Besides, he'll need money if he wants to achieve something important down the road. Today was a humbling lesson for Arthur. In his past life, he may have been a king, but here, he's just a child. He realizes that to handle these political power struggles, he'll need to build up some political influence of his own. To get started, he met with Cynthia Goodsky, the dean of the Magic Academy, first thing the next morning. Goodsky holds serious weight as the head of Xyrus Academy, and her influence stretches across the entire region. It's not every day someone gets to meet her face to face. She's heard plenty of praise about Arthur from Vincent, but she's not the type to buy into hype without seeing proof, so she plans to test him herself. Right off the bat, she tries to shake him with a burst of her magical pressure, but Arthur doesn't flinch. He manages to hold steady, though he admits to himself that her power is terrifying. Then again, that's expected when you're standing in front of the strongest mage in the country. He knows the only way to earn her respect is to prove that Vincent wasn't exaggerating. He starts by surrounding himself with wind magic while lifting a few rocks with earth magic at the same time. Then he launches the rocks toward her, boosted by a burst of wind. She blocks the entire attack with one hand like it's nothing. Arthur follows up by forming multiple fire kunai behind her. But before they even get close, she sweeps them away with wind. He's stunned no matter what he throws at her. She handles it without breaking a sweat. Growing frustrated, Arthur charges in with his fists, but before he even gets close, she knocks him back with a wall of wind. He crashes hard into the ground, and it's obvious there's no way he's beating Goodsky right now. But she's not disappointed. She tells him he's clearly gifted, but he overestimates himself. That's why he thought he had a shot at overpowering her. Then, just to show him what real power looks like, she says his final test will be whether or not he can stay conscious after her next move. She raises both arms and unleashes a powerful wave of sound magic in his direction. It rips through the air, shattering rocks nearby and nearly wrecking Arthur's hearing. But he digs in and stays upright until the wave passes. Goodsky is impressed. His toughness catches her attention, and now she's thinking she wants to take him on as her student. But Arthur's got a few things to set straight first. He didn't come to her for amusement, he came because she holds the kind of power and influence he needs. Everything he's doing is for one purpose only, to protect his family and the people he cares about. If she can promise him that, then he's all in. He'll join the academy and accept her as his mentor. Goodsky is genuinely impressed by how bold Arthur is, especially since the deal he's proposing is completely one-sided. But Arthur believes he's worth it, and to be fair, she can't really argue with that. Talents like his don't come around often. She's about to accept his terms, but Arthur brings up one last thing. He tells her he won't enroll until he hits the official age requirement, because he wants to be around kids his own age. Goodsky asks why he'd want to delay his admission by 3 whole years. Arthur explains that he wants to enjoy life the right way, and to do that, he plans to become an adventurer and travel across the continent. Goodsky can see he's made up his mind, and there's no point trying to talk him out of it. She asks if he's discussed this with his parents yet, but Arthur says he still has to head home and explain it to them. So Goodsky tells him this if he can get his family's blessing. Then she'll agree to everything. But the second Arthur returns home and tells them what he's planning, Alice shuts it down immediately. She doesn't even hesitate. Reynolds tries to step in, asking her to at least hear Arthur out, but Alice refuses. He just got back after being away for years, and now he wants to leave again. She's not ready to go through that twice. Reynolds tries to find middle ground and asks if she'd be okay with it if Arthur had a guardian traveling with him. But Alice won't budge. Then Arthur steps up, tells her this isn't going to be like last time. He won't be disappearing for years. He'll just be going on short adventures and will come home every few months to see them. That part helps Alice calm down a little. And besides, Arthur's not heading out tomorrow. He says he's staying home for another month or two, wants more time to enjoy being back with them. At the same time, he explains that he needs to see more of the Dicathan continent. There's still too much he doesn't understand. Staying home and training alone for years would get boring fast. He needs real experience, and the only way to get it is to go out there and test himself in the real world. Alice isn't totally against the idea of Arthur becoming an adventurer anymore, but she's still nervous about it. So she asks him to make one promise never keep secrets from her. Arthur agrees and promises to always be honest with her, though deep down he knows there are things he can't share with his family. Meanwhile, Reynolds still believes it's smart to have someone watch over Arthur. Since adventuring can get real dangerous, he decides to reach out to some old friends and see if anyone's willing to take the role. He doesn't have much to offer in terms of payment, but he promises to make it up to them however he can. But the members of Twin Horns tell him not to stress about money. They're all friends here, and they'd be happy to give up some of their time to help Arthur out. That said, Adam immediately bows out. He says he hates babysitting, and he's worried that if he annoys Arthur too much, the kid might kill him in his sleep. The rest of the group laughs but agrees Adam can be annoying enough that Arthur might actually consider it. Then out of nowhere, Jasmine raises her hand and says she'll do it. That catches everyone off guard, especially since she hates bodyguard work even more than Adam does. But Jasmine says that if it's for Arthur, she's willing to take it on. Reynolds is grateful she stepped up, and just like that, the matter is settled. Jasmine's an augmentor like Arthur, and she recently hit the light orange stage. Plus, she and Arthur get along pretty well, so she's a great fit for the job. Now that the Guardian issue is handled, Arthur asks Reynolds if he can make a quick stop at the auction house. He still needs to pick out a sword. Reynolds is fine with it, so he reaches out to Vincent to set it up. The next morning, Arthur meets up with Vincent and tells him he needs a sword for his adventurer admissions test. Vincent gives him the green light to look around as much as he wants. His collection is massive, and sorting through all the blades is going to take a while. By the time dinner rolls around, Arthur still hasn't come home. Alice starts to worry and thinks maybe she should go find him, but Reynolds tells her to relax. Picking the right weapon takes time, and it's better to let Arthur figure it out at his own pace. At the same time, Arthur's pacing around, frustrated out of his mind. He's already browsed through what feels like hundreds of swords, and not a single one's caught his eye. Most of the weapons here are clearly built for augmenters, big heavy two-handers, or oversized one-handed blades. That setup doesn't work for him. With his small frame, those things would wear him down quick. He even checks out other kinds of weapons just in case, but nothing jumps out. Right when he's about to give up, Sylvie suddenly tugs at him and leads him over to what looks like a beat-up stick lying on the floor. Arthur's confused why she's so into it, but he picks it up anyway. The second he does, he realizes this thing's heavier than it should be. It doesn't feel like a stick at all, more like there's something hidden inside, maybe a blade. Arthur tries pulling on the handle, but it's stuck, so he sends in a little mana, and as soon as he does, glowing runes flash in front of his face, and the blade smoothly slides out. Arthur blinks. He's never seen a sword built like this. He gives it a few swings to test it, but it's way too heavy for him to handle comfortably. Still, the craftsmanship is insane. He manages to slice straight through a thick barrel like it's made of butter. While he's still checking it out, the sword suddenly zaps him, making him drop it on the floor. He quickly picks it back up, and that's when he notices something strange. The balance feels completely different now, absolutely perfect. The weight, the size, the grip, everything aligns with his body, as if it was made for him. That gets his attention. In all his years as King Grey, he's owned some incredible swords, but nothing that ever felt this tailored. He swings it again and demolishes another barrel with ease. Just then, Reynolds, Vincent, and Jameson walk in. Arthur's been gone so long, dinner's already gone cold. They ask him if he finally picked a sword. Arthur, not wanting to show off the real one, grabs some random basic sword from a nearby rack and says that's the one he wants. Reynolds tests it out, realizes it's not anything special, but shrugs. If Arthur says that's the one, then Vincent's cool with it and tells him it's his. At the same time, Vincent catches sight of the stick hanging from Arthur's hip and asks about it. Arthur quickly makes something up, saying it's just an old stick he stumbled across and figured he'd use it for practice swings or something harmless. It's definitely not a sword. Vincent raises an eyebrow, confused because he doesn't remember storing anything like that. He turns to Jameson and tells him to check the inventory to see where it came from. Jameson pulls up the info and explains that some old man once tossed the stick at him while mumbling about how there's no one fit to wield it. Everyone thought it was just a solid-looking stick. They even had a few appraisers take a look at it, but none of them could find anything special. Still, Jameson thought it looked cool enough, so he tossed it into storage. Arthur then asks if he can keep it, and since Vincent has no real use for it, he agrees to let him take it along. Over the next few weeks, Arthur enjoys his time with his family and gets ready for the road ahead. Then, before he realizes it, his 9th birthday shows up. They throw him a big party, and afterward, everyone gathers to hand him their gifts. The first one is from Alice, a glove embedded with gems designed for healing magic, just in case he ever gets hurt. Next is Vincent's present, which turns out to be a pair of rings. One goes to Arthur, the other to Alice. If Arthur ever ends up in serious danger, the ring will alert Alice so they can send help. Finally, Adam gives him a magic scroll that lets him record and send voice messages, so he can talk to his mom and get responses while he's away. Arthur thanks them all for the amazing gifts. Since he's leaving the next day, he tells everyone how much he truly appreciates what they've done for him. Alice holds his hand and asks him to stay safe. She doesn't care about status or riches, she only wants her son to come back in one piece. That night, Arthur finishes packing. He feels a little down about leaving his family again, but he knows this is the path he has to take if he wants to protect them. He needs to see the world, grow stronger, and figure out how to stand on his own. With everything packed, he walks downstairs where the whole family is waiting for one last goodbye. Reynolds gives him a serious look and reminds him not to get cocky. He might be strong, but there's always someone stronger out there. But no matter what happens, they'll be cheering for him the whole way. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, it makes all the difference.